are about to watch a long 3-hour video. I know, very packed, but it's packed with substantial content that I really think that you would enjoy. So I just wanted to give you a forewarning that not only is it 3 hours long, but it's very meaty. It's broken up into chapters. Please feel free to pause, go live life, and then come right back. Also, don't forget to check out the description where you can find a lot of these people's social media and things of that nature. And make sure to leave questions, comments, concerns, whatever you might have. And please don't forget to like and share. All right, let's get this started. All right, welcome everyone to the ENFJ block party. So if you don't know what this is, we had the ENFJ sausage party a few months ago. If y'all haven't seen that, y'all need to definitely go and check it out. There's some familiar faces over here. And then right after that, we had the ENFJ slumber party, where we also have a couple of familiar faces over here too. So right now we have the block party, and it was gonna be bigger, like at least 4 to 5 people dropped out. One of them literally just last minute, but I think they were still have a good size over here to like have a really good conversation. So we have some stuff lined up, and I'm really excited for what's about to pop off today. So starting off, I want each of y'all to introduce yourselves, say whatever you think is necessary before we get started with Kinsey.
Well, hello everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces here. I haven't met all of you before, but I have seen you on previous videos of DZs, so very nice to meet you. My name is Kinsey. I am an ENFJ. If you go by OP, I'd be an ENFJ feminine masculine. I'm also an Enneagram 3 wing 2 social, and I primarily work in sales and financial fields. That's kind of my forte and what I do. And I'm really excited to be here. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Jessica.
Hi, everyone. It's my first time being here on Denzel's channel. I'm very excited. And I currently live in Poland. I studied Japanese, and I currently also study sociology. I'm also a teacher. I teach German, English, and Japanese. And yeah, it's like exciting to be here and to meet you all guys. And also, I'm a 3 Enneagram. A sexual on both.
Hi, I'm Rob. This Q is silent, as Denzel mentioned earlier. I have a YouTube channel called Rob in Reality where I talk about typology, mostly objective personality based, but I've also been getting more into the Enneagram recently. So I'm a 9-wing-1 in that system. And in OP, I'm actually a jumper ENFJ, FESE. So I also write about that on my blog, subjectivepersonality.com, which is a little play on words there. So good to be here.
Hi, you can call me Emrys. I'm not actually an ENFJ. I've just been deceiving Denzel for years. No, I'm an ENFJ. I am an Enneagram sexual 3, probably a wing 4. Not sure I'm a wing yet. I love teaching D&D, mysticism and esoteric spirituality, and conversations that keep you up till 3 a.m.
This is why I'm in love with you.
Denzel, you're confessing this way? I love it.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Tina, ENFJ of course, Enneagram 6, and a little bit about me is I work in the financial industry, specifically in fraud. And I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. Something that I'm very committed to is just being a better person every day, spiritually, emotionally, physically, everything like that. So I'm all about personal development and self-improvement.
What's up, fam? My name's Cam. I am an ENFJ, and this is the third time, maybe the fourth time I've been featured on the DZ Mensah's channel. I am consistently the least educated when it comes to personality types and the like. So forgive me as I pretend to wax eloquent about stuff I have no idea of what I'm talking about. But as far as Enneagram is concerned, I'm pretty sure I'm a 7. I don't know what the wings exactly mean. I think, whatever, we don't have to get into that. And yeah, what do? I work as a creative director at a church. So I do graphic design, photography, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, Cameron's a 7 wing 8 most likely, and he's a social 7. That's for sure.
Hi guys, my name is Vicky. I'm a ENFJ. I'm a 2W3 in Enneagram. I have my own YouTube channel and it's Vicky Calderon. And I also have Instagram dedicated to ENFJs. It's ENFJs_Vix. And yeah.
Awesome. And then for those who might not already know me, I'm Denzel Mensah. I'm an ENFJ, 9 wing 1, social sexual, and also a practitioner for the Myers-Briggs life coach. And yeah, today we have 4 ENFJ men and 4 ENFJ women. If I'm counting correctly, that's right, yes. And we're just going to be talking about a few various different things. So the first thing I actually wanted to pop us off with are what are your immediate thoughts on love and hate? I guess we can start with Kinsey. And if anyone has any commentary like after each person, you can just pop in before it goes to the next person.
This is such a complex question. So I did spend some time kind of thinking about this. And I think it really comes down to what your definitions of love and hate are. Because the first place that my brain goes to, I'm an avid studier of the Hebrew language and of the scriptures. So in Hebrew, love is very different than what we think of it in the English language. Instead of being a feeling or an emotion, love is actually a verb. So you would show somebody every day that you love them by the actions that you take. So outside of being a feeling, what the idea of love and hate really reminded me of is the Yitzhak Hara and the Yitzhak Hatov, the good and the bad. And in Hebrew, when we're looking at this, it's kind of like a muscle. The one that you exercise more, the one that you use more, becomes more of what your character is. But without understanding the differences between the Yitzhak Hara, the good, the bad, and the Yitzhak Hatov, the evil, you wouldn't know what the other one is. So I think it's important to have that dynamic to be able to appreciate when somebody really does love you. And I also think of it in like my day-to-day life is oftentimes I am more hurt less by hate than I am by indifference. Because by the time someone gets to indifference, you don't care enough to have emotion towards someone. So I thought that those were like a couple of key pieces that I wanted to pick apart, but obviously we're called to love and to be loving towards others. And it just kind of depends on what does our definition of love mean and how are we living them out? How are we showing people actively that we love them? And knowing what that other side looks like gives us context. Just like with good days and bad days, you wouldn't know what the highs are without the lows. And I think that's true for both love and hate. So those are my thoughts, and pass it over.
Okay, so maybe I'll continue. And yeah, I also had the same thought like Kinsey, that it all comes down to how do you define love and hate. But then I just like continued thinking, and for me those are like very strong emotions that are a bit connected to each other. But then I went like deeper and thought, what is the connection between them? And although you can go from love to hate, you cannot go from hate to love, I think. Not thinking about the casual I love you or I hate you, like in a sarcastic way things, but more about the deep feelings, like all those stereotypical like love stories about haters to lovers or something like that. I don't think it is realistic, but then yeah, the opposite way is sadly realistic. So that's what my thoughts were about the first thoughts about love and hate. I think more about the interconnectedness between them, and I think that's all.
So when I think about love and hate, I think about like what do I love and hate, and it feels like a hard question for me to answer, because whenever I like start to really love something a whole lot, I always like feel like the need to disperse that energy, and it might be somewhat relatable for other nines out there in terms of like I don't want to like dive too deep on one thing because I need to kind of like spread this energy out. So, and in terms of being an ENFJ, I sort of see that as dispersing that FE spectrum. So it's like, okay, that's one data point on the spectrum, and I kind of need to like look around and see more than just like, okay, I love this, but like, what are other people thinking about this? Like, do I need to like inform them that this is something that's really valuable and let them know about it? Or is this something that people already know about? So it's like constantly like not just staying in one spot and getting like overly tied to that particular point. And that goes for both types of things. Like, this is something we need to avoid. This is something we need to like move towards, and constantly like trying to be aware of that and keep people informed of it is like this autopilot thing that's going on inside of me at all times. So that's kind of where my mind was going with the love and hate. Pass over to you, Cam.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't. I just didn't think deeply enough about the topic. I think I really did take it at face value, particularly like the feeling aspect of love and hate. Kinsey, I love what you said about just the Hebrew understanding of love, and how the different verbiage that's used, how it speaks to the different types of love. I think from my perspective, thinking about the question, it was like as a person like myself, like I feel like I don't hate very often. Like, it's very rare for me to just like straight up hate something. And maybe that's an ENFJ thing, right? It's like you try your best to figure out what there is to love about something. Almost to the point where I feel like the only things that I do hate are the things that I love, like, or had loved at once. Like you ever be chilling in the bed, like it's just you and the ceiling fan, and you think about a chick or a dude you used to date back in the day, like they're long gone, right? And like they just come to your mind, and you're like, oh god, gross, get it out of my head, right? That feeling of like disgust. It's not even the person themselves, but it's the thought of what you had and how much you enjoyed it at the time, and now that you don't have it, you hate even the thought of it. Like, that's what I think about when I think about hate. Most of the other things that I feel like I hate, I really don't hate. I just say that because it's easier than explaining why I dislike it so viscerally. Yeah, that's my first thought.
So Cam, would you say that that's kind of like your historical context around something? So something that you've experienced that's caused hurt that then you look back on that causes the strong emotion. Is that kind of what you're relating it to?
Yeah, I think so. I think in order for me to really hate something, I have to have had some context with which I experienced it. It's hard for me to hate something that's on the other side of the world. Like right now, what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, horrible, right? People dying in the streets, nuclear warehouses getting bombed and stuff. Even with all of that that's going on, it's really hard for me to hate Vladimir Putin or like whatever's going on over there, because I feel like I still lack the understanding or the clarity behind it. Part of me, and it's probably like an arrogance, is like, maybe if I sat down and just talked with him, I could understand where he's coming from and I wouldn't hate him as much. But like, I can think of this dude that I grew up with. His name is Rio Johnson. Can't stand him. He took me out back in like second grade and he gave me a wedgie. And like, to this day, I can't stand Rio Johnson. I haven't seen him in like 15 years, but I can't stand the dude. And Vladimir Putin is objectively a worse human being than Rio. But because I have the experience with Rio and I lack the experience with Vlad, it's a lot harder for me to equate the hate.
That is so interesting. Let's all look up this Rio guy and maybe spam his account on the behalf of Cam. But no, that I think that's definitely like an ENFJ thing in my opinion. Like, and it goes back to like the NI, which by the way, Cam, you said that you're consistently the person who knows like the least about type. I think that you and Tina are probably on the same page. So
What's up, girl?
yeah. So y'all are pretty much good there. But NI, introvert intuition, the ENFJ's second function, often has to do with, okay, let me get more information on what this means, what's really going on behind the scenes, getting into the person's perspective. And that's often why, like Cam, you kind of said this in the sausage party video, not even kind of, you did. You said that you relate to like the kind of person who wants to understand like serial killers and stuff like that, not because you actually really, support what they're doing. I know they're not supporting what Vlad is doing, but just because you don't hate him doesn't mean that you support what he's doing in that way. So I think that that's, and oftentimes because we're able to understand where people are coming from, it's kind of like our ability to like, okay, I understand your math, and so because I understand your math, I can probably help you rearrange to get to a different conclusion. But you can't really influence people if you don't understand the calculations that they're putting in. Because whatever Vlad is doing, everybody views themselves to be rational. So in his mind, he sees himself to be rational in whatever way. We don't know 100% what type of math equations that he's doing to be like, yeah, so we got to do this to Ukraine. But if we understand it more, then even if we still at the end are like, that's not right. There's a quote that says, if you have true empathy for someone, if you truly understand someone, all that you can have for them left is empathy. And I feel like that's the point where it's like, okay, if you really did sit down to understand Vlad, that maybe hate wouldn't, really be as big of a thing. But still though, yeah, I'm gonna wait to see like what some of the others say. But that was a good question, Kinsey.
So my thoughts on love and hate. I really enjoyed listening to each and every one of you so far. Yeah, so I agree with what most of you had to say, but I mostly relate to Jessica. You can't really go from like hate back to love. And also like hate, I feel like my initial thought is like when you hate something or hate someone, like that just like consumes you, like that takes the life out of you. So it's not good to hate. And also with love, it's complex for me because love can go to care. It just really depends on the concept of love. Like if you love someone like romantically, like a friend, how do you know it's love instead of care? Yeah, so I thought of that. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, that's where my thoughts are on that.
I have a thought too on what Vicky said. Sorry, I won't take up all the time talking, I promise. But Vicky, what that kind of made me think of is like back to like what our definition of love is, and having love kind of on a spectrum, because I can really love a bagel, but I don't love a bagel the same way that I love my family, right? And I
Right.
don't love my close friends the same way that I love my spouse. So what is that idea of love to us?
Right.
And within those relationships, like, are we going to define it as love? Are we going to
Or
define
care.
it as care? And what is that spectrum? Because there's so many
Right,
different
because love and care
shades of
goes hand in
love.
hand. So how can you separate those when those two things, well, at least for me, go hand in hand? You can't have love without care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
But
love
yeah.
that because care is
Kinsey,
kind of an
have you
action. So
Yeah.
that's really cool.
Kinsey, have you ever heard of Rabbi Twersky?
I don't know if I have.
He had a video, because I'm so well versed in rabbis. He had a video that went viral, I don't know, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. It's called Fish Love. And I'd be curious if any of you guys have seen it, but you should really look it up. It's cool. It's only like 4 minutes long. But he's basically this dude that's like 10 years older than God, talking about the difference between loving something and loving what that thing can do for you. And his analogy is that of a fish, right? Somebody who enjoys eating fish. He's like, do you love, he asked the person in his analogy, do you love fish? And the person's like, yeah. And so then the guy says, then why did you take the fish out of the water, slowly kill it, and then put it over a fire, roast it, and then consume it? And the dude's like, you don't love fish, you love what fish does for you. And he was like, so the things that you love are the things that you promote or encourage to grow.
Care for. Yeah.
The things that you care for, right? As opposed to the things that you consume. You don't love the thing, you love what it does. So I thought that was
Kinsey doesn't really love bagels. She just loves what bagels do for her. If I'm right.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Emrys?
Hate is a distortion of love. Love is the creative force or angle of attack that consciousness takes to generate the reality that we experience, because love is the reality saying yes to everything that exists. So as a sort of like fundamental principle of reality, that's the nature of love, is saying yes to the way things are presently. But that includes saying yes to all the desires for the way things could be different or the way things could be better. So it ends up with a primary principle of like honoring the free will of each entity that is being said yes to by reality. Now, for those who, you know, there may be some on the call or some who watch the video who don't find it helpful to personify or attribute consciousness to like reality or to some divine consciousness behind reality. But that kind of approach that sees love as reality saying yes to everything is still highly applicable toward how we love, where love looks at a thing and accepts it the way it is without judgment, while also accepting the way that one would like that thing to be otherwise. So there's a process of change without judgment. Hate, by contrast, is a rejection of the way a particular thing is, and it's usually love that's been hurt badly. It's something is considered beautiful or delightful or worthy of love, and then is apparently taken away. And so the thing that appeared to take it away becomes the object of hatred. It usually creates loops in one's experience because it's a form of like extreme judgment. And so rather than being able to like accept the way reality is and then work to change it, it often gets people caught up in rejecting the way reality is. And so rather than focusing on change, it becomes a focus on attempting to attack the thing that's hated. And that usually just creates the same scenario in a loop over and over. I mean, human warfare, for example. Finally, I'd say that like love and hate are in some ways representative of different ways that humans can, let's say, personally or spiritually evolve, by which I mean like grow to be able to experience more of reality more expansively and with more capability, because you can do that through choosing a path of love of all, and through doing the kinds of things where you're discerning, like this is in line with love, this is not, and then choosing to follow a path of love that opens yourself up to whatever reality brings you and then enables you to use the creative force of love to change it. You can also use hatred in a similar way with a very different result, where you can hone hatred as like an aspect of your will to essentially enslave other people, which is very common in like, you know, dictatorships and even on small scales where people try to manipulate and control each other. And in doing so, you gain potentially gain a great amount of control over reality and ability to navigate reality, but it's a much harder path as far as suffering goes. So I see those also not only as like, you know, the fundamental creative principle and a distortion of it, but as like a choice that faces each one of us of like, how do you want to relate to reality? Through love or through fear, hatred, separation.
So does that kind of go a little bit with what Cam was talking about, where the love was hurt and that's where the hate was felt, a distortion of kind of the two?
Yes, at least in its initial experience. And then when that experience happens, humans have an option of choosing to still find love in the midst of a moment that also contains hate, or to take that hate and attempt to use it to essentially uh, enslave other people. Like, and there's plenty of examples we've seen of people who do that to a very skillful degree, but I think we often underestimate that. This is one of the things that I don't know if Putin, for example, is that dedicated to this path, but if someone has experienced that, like hatred arising as a result of wounded love, and then has decided that they want to continue to pursue hatred and to use that hatred as a central feature of how they relate to the world, if they get far enough along down that path and they've genuinely decided that's the path they want, then it can be either extremely difficult or downright impossible to convince them otherwise. We tend to think that like everybody is just, acting out of ignorance, but there is some people who see that nature of reality as hate versus love and decide that what they want to experience is hate.
I would agree with that. I think that's really powerful. There are some people that willfully choose to go down that road. I think that's a good, powerful explanation, Emrys.
Tina?
Thank you kindly.
Okay, so everybody said really good things, and I picked up a few things that I wanted to kind of elaborate on. The first one is that I used to think that love and hate were like opposites, but I realized that it's on a spectrum. Love is here, hate is here, and I feel like it's like a scale. You can just drag it. There's certain things in your life or certain people in your life that make you want to drag the scale from one end to the other. And okay, yeah, so that's that. But when it comes to hate, I think something that really I think about, okay, so it's like hate it's just love that was like stepped on and abused and taken advantage of. And it manifested into something really ugly, which is why it turned into hate. And yeah, so anytime you hear someone say something like, I hate my boyfriend, I hate my ex, or I hate my family, I try not to see it as malice. I'm just thinking, who caused you to feel that painful? Like who caused you that pain to the point where you feel like you say, I hate them. So it's like, that's how I look at hate. It's not an evil thing. It's something or someone that caused us like disrupt, like in the core of us and our spirit. And another thing that I think of when it comes to hate is like resentment that never got resolved. Because for me, when I say that I hate something, I resented it for so long and I never addressed it. And I just let it fester there to the point where I really let that turn into, again, something really nasty and ugly. So I try not to associate hate with something bad. Because I'm being honest with you, I do say the word hate. People are like, don't use that word. It's just really strong. No, but if I felt that at the moment and I still feel the way and it's never been healed, yeah, I'm going to say I hate that. And again, another thing, hate is something we don't understand. Growing up, I hated math. It would bring me to tears. And to this day, I hate math. Why? Because I just don't understand it. It's that simple. We hate what we don't understand. Okay, now when it comes to love, it's a little thing. My answer is kind of weak, but if I were to put it in a nutshell for someone, whose first language is English, I think like it's a feeling. Like when I think about all the people and the things and experiences that I love in life, and I use that word, I think of like comfort and home. That person or that thing or that experience made me feel safe, and they honored me and they respected me. And because of that, like I have that love. It's kind of like, it's like, if you can provide that for me, I'm providing you the love. It's I don't know if I'm making sense, but yeah, like at the end of the day, it's like everything that I love and every person that I love, I just think like y'all put me in a position where like I feel so safe, and because of that, I can return that to you. I can gift you that love also.
Yeah, that's we all gave like really interesting answers, especially I really like what Emrys said about hate is usually love that has been hurt badly. And it's kind of going along with like what Tina has said. I don't think I thought about it in that way before. We always hear like the popular sayings like, oh, light and darkness are not opposites, but darkness is the absence of light. And for love and hate, I don't think that I would say that they're opposites. People usually say that fear is the opposite of love. And because it kind of like goes with what Tina is saying, it's like, oh, you hate bees because you're afraid of bees, or you don't understand these people, so you hate them, kind of thing. But even then, I'm like, I don't really know. Maybe love doesn't even have an opposite per se, because I'm also thinking about what Kinsey said too, with like indifference versus hate. And that's something that's like really big to me, because I know, like, for example, like in the Bible, it says that if you pretty much hate your brother, then you may as well have killed them. Like it's pretty much like equated to like murder. It's like, whoa, that's interesting. But I do think that indifference and hate, they're really interesting because, like some of y'all said, I think I very rarely feel hatred, but I feel indifference a lot. And I'm also wondering if it's like a TI thing, like the ENFJs inferior function of just like, as a dominant FE user, like FE is like all about like, meeting people's needs and creating harmony and paying attention to social dynamics and everything. Then eventually you just do so much of that and then you burn out. It's like, you know what? I'm done. I don't even care anymore. Like I think of, I don't know how many of y'all have watched Drake and Josh, but one episode, and maybe it's just my 9ness coming out, but one episode that always like really resonated with me was Drake pretty much let Josh down so many times that one day finally Josh was just like, you know what? I'm just done. And Drake was like, what do you mean? He's like, we're going to forever be roommates, and we're going to abide under the same roof and everything, but that's all that we're going to be. And for the rest of that episode, like, Josh didn't have any ill will toward Drake. Like, he didn't fill up the car because he just felt like, no, I'm just going to fill up how much I need for gas and everything. But it wasn't like to get back at Drake. Like, I think that would be where hate is. But instead, he was just looking out for himself. Like, he was just doing what he had to do. I think that hate involves energy, just like love involves energy. Like, hate involves energy to actually antagonize someone. Whereas like indifference is like, I'm not even thinking about you. Like, if I'm indifferent towards a situation or towards a person, it's just like, you know what? No, I don't. No, I'm not mad at you. I don't hate you. I don't care about you anymore. You're not on my mind. Like, that's it. And I'm wondering too, like, if that's even like a worse thing to experience for some people, because that means that you kind of don't even exist to them. Like, some people would rather you at least be acknowledging them and giving them like, bad publicity rather than almost acting as if like they're just irrelevant. So yeah, that's one of my first thoughts that come to mind. But then secondly, I just also really think that, it's just really hard for me to hate in general, because I try so hard to understand. That's not to say that people who do still hate don't understand, because I think that you can understand something very well, and then you can just have like very strong emotions towards it still to like hate that person in that way. I don't fault anyone for hating Hitler, for example. Like, it makes sense to me. I think that's one of the main things that come to mind, like just expressing love in a way that like eradicates hate. And that's the point where I think that I'm kind of like falling off. Like, that's my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I really like how you brought up like love and hate both kind of require energy. And like as a fellow 9, I'm like, indifference is like a major tool to like conserve my energy. You know, like if I just kind of like numb out to this, then I don't have to like put energy into it. I don't have to do anything about it because it's not a problem anymore, right? So that's like definitely a pattern I see in myself, and it's like something I'm like, oh, maybe I should like take some time to like think about where I really stand on this. Am I closer to loving it or hating it? So that's like kind of a growth point for me in some ways. Like if this is something I hate, then maybe there's something sort of solution I need to like dig into here to figure out like why that is, what I could do to resolve it, right? So
Yeah.
I really like that you brought up the energy.
Yeah, that's big for me. Energy is big for me, and I really don't have energy to hate. Because especially as a 9, like I hate being angry. So there's that. So it's like when I get angry, then I get even more angry because the person made me angry to begin with. Because that just takes up so much energy for me. So then it's kind of like I've become this Super Saiyan that just outraged, and now I'm exhausted after that. So
yeah, it's like, I got to do something about this now.
Exactly.
No.
Does anyone else have any comments for the second question?
So I just wanted to add that glad that Tina said that we hate what we don't understand. Like I can see it in Poland for when the situation happened right now, and when the situation with the refugees happened a bit earlier in autumn. In fall, we say, I think, in America. Yeah, people in Poland, they don't understand that people that look different or are from a different culture, that they can also be refugees and need help. And then, I mean, not all of the people in Poland, of course, but when I'm hearing right now that the refugees that are coming in right now, that they're like our refugees, or they look like us, so we need to give them shelter. I still feel bad for the people. We also took one family, like my friend's family, in. We were taking care of them, but like the previous people, they also needed help, right? So that's like something that you can really like manipulate people when you hear this narrative in the television, and it's like it's a really strong tool to have, I would say, and a very, very dangerous one too. Yeah.
Are you able to evaluate, like, in that culture, what do you think is fueling the perception of some people as us and some people as not us? Like, some people as with us and some people as separate?
Yeah, I think it's just that now Ukraine, Poland, like Polish territory was in the past also a bit of Ukraine. So the culture is very like similar per se, and people see that. I mean, just they look similar. So because Poland is a quite homogeneous country, and Ukraine is similar, I'd say. And then yeah, just the culture and the looks, it's very like superficial, I would say. And then when refugees from the Middle East arrived, they didn't see that those are also people that just need help, that they are people that are fleeing from war or just are looking for a better life. They saw people that are potential terrorists. So I think they're like, people aren't bad, they just are scared and they don't know. And the only solution would be like educating them.
Thank you. That's very insightful.
No problem.
Who/what is y'all's favorite MBTI type and why? I feel like a lot of people would love to know this. Kinsey.
That's a difficult question because all of the MBTI types are unique in their own way and needed.
Such an
More-
ENFJ answer. Boo.
I know. More so than functions, I care about character. And I think we've discussed this before. Personality and character are not the same thing. And I think people newer to personality can kind of get that mixed up because you're doing things because of a certain way, right? But it's just how your brain's processing information. So for me, there can be any type that's healthy and any type that's unhealthy. And I can meet a spectrum of any type and really get along with them, and then some that I clash with. I think as a general, it's easier for me to find the ones that I clash with. Masculine DE, so TE or FE, especially in STJs, I have a very, very difficult time with. And I have actually quite a few of them in my in-law family. Love them to death. But the masculine DE is probably, especially when it's a demon function, when it's like a tertiary or a 3-year-old, I think it gets inappropriate very quickly. And as an FE driver, trying to like manage the emotional climate, oftentimes I'm like, oh my goodness, let's take about 50% off. Let's bring that back down. But as far as ones I really get along with, I don't feel like I've really gotten a great panel of intuitives in the wild. So that would be kind of difficult for me to even speak to. Other than my mom and one friend of mine, I don't know anyone else in my personal life that has NI in a front seat. But what I can say is the ones day to day that I get along with tend to be TI drivers with feminine DE on the bottom. So INTP and ISTP, those especially, those TI drivers that are just very soft on the tribe, I love them to death because they have all of this amazing data and they're like, here, I've thought through it and I know it's good. Do you want it? As opposed to like masculine is like, here, take it. Like, I don't know if it's good or not, but have it, you know? But that feminine DE on the bottom with the TI on top, especially being an EJ where my big struggle is self-identity, knowing who I am outside of the tribe, I'm so inspired by those IPs that just, even FI drivers, IPs that really have it together. And I have a soft spot for the ones that have the feminine DE on the bottom because they're just, they tend to be the kindest people I know. They're just so, when you're in their circle, you are in their circle. And there's a part of me who's very much of a meet everybody's needs kind of person that really admires their ability to have themselves grounded. So kind of a long-winded answer because really it's more about character than it is about function. But if I had to say specifically IPs with feminine DE at the bottom, I tend to get along with it really, really well.
Okay, so I'm not that long into MBTI that I can properly answer this question, I guess, because I'm like maybe 1 year interested in it. So I didn't have the time to like analyze my friends and who's like taking like what characteristics, what cognitive functions are like dominant in my friend groups. But yeah, so it will be probably a very ENFJ or intuitive type answer. But yeah, I think the intuitives just, I just have the best conversation, and it can be NI, it can be any, either digging deep or just discovering or jumping all over like the place. It's always very fun. But then, you know, you have the warm SI users giving your fruits and stuff, and it's also nice. So I would agree with Kinsey. It all comes down to character, and you can have like a unhealthy type, and it can be whatever type, and we won't get along. And then you can have a healthy type from whatever MBTI type, and it will be fun. So sorry, but I'm not that long into MBTI.
You're totally good. I mean, I don't expect everyone to have interacted with every single type in that way. It's just more of like, who have you noticed? Like, oh, there's been a big number of these people that I've gotten the most along with, even though I haven't met any ISTJs that I know of and stuff like that. So this is just for people maybe who are like wondering, like, oh, what is the pattern of the types that ENFJs seem to be most interested in? And yeah, just why. But if you don't have one in mind, then that's totally okay.
Okay, maybe when I think about people that I clicked like almost instantly, then it's my bestie who's an INTJ and then now an ENFP. So intuitive, so I'd say.
So I guess I would say generally like EPs in general, I'm pretty drawn to, just kind of bringing up new things and sort of, I kind of like flow with the chaos a little bit. So I'm kind of okay with it. But I think if I had to pick a single MBTI type, I think I'd just go with ESFP, just because it's kind of my current pet guess for my wife's type, and I'm not positive on it, but that's my guess for her. And I don't know, that they're just like the type that they really know what they care about, and they're always like digging into that, and they just kind of like, they're interested in going out and doing stuff that relates back to that. And I love kind of like keeping up with where they're going with their personal values and all those sorts of things, and how that sort of relates to everything else that's going on. So everybody that's kind of like clear about where they are on the spectrum, I'm like super into that. I don't know. That's just kind of like makes it my job easy. And then we can kind of like work from there, right? So
they're actually known apparently as the most likable type. So that
yeah.
makes sense. Like they're the least judgmental, according to I guess like generally speaking, because they're really just all about facing everything in life and just experiencing everything in life and then moving on. So yeah, that would make sense. And of course, very rarely can you say they're not fun.
Yeah, I've had a lot of good experiences with a lot of different types, but that's just what I'll throw out there is like, when the EP walks in the room, I'm like, oh, there they are again. Let's see what's gonna happen.
Can y'all hear me? I think yeah, I'm definitely even worse than Jessica. Like I'm not great at typing people in general, but if I think back to all of the people that I generally like just enjoy being around, they tend to be like either less extroverted than I am, like they're introverts, and they're more like self-assured of what it is they believe, even if like I think they're dead wrong. Those are the types of people that I generally like to associate with, because it's a lot easier for them to kind of express what it is they're feeling and why they're feeling it. And I admire that, because it's a lot more difficult for me to figure out what it is or why, why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. So like one of my best friends from college, and we still keep up, he's an INFJ. And he's, I don't know, in a lot of ways we're really similar, but in other ways he's like a lot more just inquisitive about life. He thinks before he speaks. He's not always the ham in the middle of the spotlight. And there's just a lot that I admire about that. So like, I don't know, the ones that I generally see myself hanging around, they're definitely on the introverted side. That's pretty much all I got.
So for me, I can't choose. Well, I'm stuck between two. I would say the INTP, because I love how they always refine their own worldview. I love that about them. The NE, I like different perspectives. And I would say the INTJ, because they have the introverted intuition as their dominant. I like how they have this amazing vision for the future, and I love how they implement that vision into reality. So yeah.
It's an interesting question, because I feel like, okay, obligatory FE caveat is that I learn from all the types, and I feel like that makes me see a huge amount of value in all the types. Like the ones that are very different from me extremely challenge my perception of reality, and then challenge me to integrate that other perspective on reality into my own, and to accept it even when I don't agree with it. And then there are ones who give unique like blessings, I guess. I mean, the people like INTPs are adorable and delightful for all the information and deep thinking and just like quiet passion for life. I look at INTJs and I'm just like, you're very impressive, like, and very inspiring. And then INFJs have been some of the most like surprisingly good at understanding. So I was thinking it was that for a while, but at the risk of associating myself with Narcissus, I'm gonna have to say that ENFJs are my favorite, the ones I feel like most drawn to, because I feel like, I think it has partly to do with my personality. So like I'm already almost like Tina was talking about, I'm almost constantly thinking about like self-improvement and learning and stuff like that. So I don't always feel like I need all of my friends to be like challenging me to learn all the time, because I'm like, I'm already doing that like 8 hours a day. Like I like so, but what I often find myself missing is understanding and exuberant celebration of shared joy. So, like with understanding, there's a lot of types that do that very well with ENFJ. Like I've noticed that pretty much anyone with introverted intuition, or to a fairly significant extent, extroverted intuition, seems to be very good at understanding the ENFJ perspective, particularly like INFJs. But then I often find that I don't have very many people who can understand that perspective and then go and like exuberantly celebrate it and like apply it in exuberant action. And I feel like ENFJs are very good at that, where they take all that internal understanding and then cast it out into the world in like this passionate engagement with reality. And I feel like that's the one thing that I have most rarely found in life. So I've mostly found that with other ENFJs, and that's why I think most drawn to them if I had to pick a favorite type.
Okay, so like what Cam said, I'm very inexperienced with MBTI, so when you guys are talking about dominant function, I only know dominant and submissive. That's about it, okay? But okay, just because I have good experiences with INFJs, I'm going to say INFJs. I know 2 INFJs, and like again, Cam said, they have this like inquisitive nature. Like they're always just trying to really get to the core, like deep into something, and they can fish that out of me with ease. We just talk, and I don't even have to like dig that out of them. We just get there like without even having to try. And also because I'm an E, I find that the introverted types are more toned down. Sometimes I'm very like strong. Like when I talk to them, they're just like chill, just be calm and stuff. So they take that calm, they take the calm side out of me. But I will say though, a runner-up is SF types. I find that SF types they take the fun side out of me. I don't do a lot of thinking. We just kind of just go. So I'll give them love. I'll give them love.
Yeah, respect. For me, this is actually pretty difficult. Kind of for the opposite reason of Cam and Tina. Like as a practitioner, every week I'm just profiling so many different people. So it's like I'll literally, spend like 2 hours talking to 4 different INFPs in 1 week each and seeing like, wow, these are 4 different ways that an INFP might show up. That's so fascinating. And, and it's nothing against my clients, but it's like, oh, this one was more fascinating personally to me than that one, or, something like that. Like that just, I might think to myself like, oh, that's interesting how this one comes out or whatever. But all of that to say that like I think I've seen both in real life and in fiction and in work the best versions of each type and then the worst versions of each type. And that's what makes me be like kind of like what Kinsey was then saying, like, man, like I see how all of them are valuable. And I know that none of y'all are saying that that any of the types are not valuable. So I'm giving that ENFJ answer like, wow, it's difficult. But I will say though that for me to answer this, I think of what do I most want? And the thing that's most important to me out of everything, like it's my lifeline, is intimacy. And I know that everybody, well, actually there's a lot of people who pride themselves on hating people. So maybe not everyone, but a lot of people claim to want intimacy, but I really feel like that's the oxygen that I breathe. And so therefore, now bringing in a little bit of what Emrys was saying, is like, I think that NFJs have, like, they always take the cake with that. And I think it has to do with that NI-FE combo. So that FE that's always, once again, focused on what's the connection between me and you? What's the connection between this person and that person? Like, and focusing on the interpersonal, and then the NI that comes in and it's like, okay, how can we constantly progress this? What's the meaning, the depth behind this? How can how can we further improve our dynamic with each other? And from someone like me who, honestly speaking, this is just me and this might bleed into the next question, I don't really care to be very famous or to be very rich or any of that. Like, and this is something that my INTJ and ISFP, so my ISFP wife and my INTJ roommate, we were talking about it, and my ISFP wife was like, "Wow, so for you, Denzel, like relationships are really just everything." I'm like, "Yeah, like literally, if I lived my whole life, and obviously I don't want to be like poor and like out on the streets, but like if I lived a comfortable life and nobody even knew me on YouTube or anything, but like I had like a small group of friends that were like just really fulfilling and intimate and consistent like that, and I'm in my deathbed and all I have is just those group of friends, no money, whatever, bro, I'm happy. Like I lived a great life in that sense. And that's pretty much like always what I'm like looking forward to. So I think that I can appreciate like a lot of things for other types, like the ESFPs. They're really fun. They're also really attractive. Same with the ISFPs. They tend to be like really attractive. The ESTPs, like they're really cool. INTJs, they're so smart, and I really deeply appreciate them. In fact, INTJs are probably my third favorite type. I really, really appreciate them. But then at the same time, sometimes they want their distance. And so it's like, okay, well, and like, I guess that's kind of like where the disconnect can come at times. Like, oh, when we're here, it's great. But I would always want the one who can't get enough of me, because I also want to feel like I can't get enough of you. And I think that that's where, the ENFJs and INFJs, like I've felt that the most with, because, like for example, like even with me and Emrys, like it might take me, there's a whole wall of text messages that is taking me a while to get back to as well with him. But it's like, we always know like this is worth speaking about. And when we hop on, this is what it is. Same thing even with Jessica. It's like, like there's just these kinds of like, we're going to talk about everything that comes to our minds and really try to understand each other and create a space of no judgment. People like to talk about FE, in my opinion. It's like, don't say this, don't say that. And I think that when it's really healthy and it's brought up enough like TI, then it's FETI is actually like about creating a space where everyone feels comfortable enough to where now we can say the dark jokes, we can say the sexual innuendos, we can say what's on our minds, like what's really like hurting us, whatever, and people and we can feel comfortable because we know that nobody really has like ill intent. So there's no like, hey, that was bad, but it's just like, no, we're just vibing here kind of thing. And I like spaces like that. And I think that with the NFJs, like that's where I found like the most depth and consistency of intimacy. Because there's other types where it's like you can get intimate with them, but then they bounce pretty like soon after, and then they might come back, and it's like, but I like that consistency there. So yeah, that's my answer in a nutshell. It's like I definitely appreciate all types, like I'm sure that all of us do. But for what I'm looking for, I think that NFJs, like they usually definitely take the cake when it comes to that.
Some thoughts on that? I thought that was a very long, just delightful explanation. And I hear a lot of the Enneagram in there too, because I'm resonating with some things that you're saying. And then over here, I'm hearing you like, I don't care to be famous or known. I'm like, well, I'm a 3 social. That's kind of like our problem. It's like, wanting to make an impact on society, and partially as a way, of wanting to feel valuable based on what we've achieved. But additionally, outside of just that part of it, is I want to do all I can for everyone I can while I'm here. So maybe that means being the next Tony Robbins. And as a 3 social, that's something that I've had to specifically work on integrating into more of the 6, more outside myself and working into like a family structure. My husband and I are expecting our first kid in this fall. So moving from that paradigm of needing to be successful, needing to be a career woman, needing to be I really enjoy public speaking. So my big dream was always like, I got to be the next Tony Robbins. I got to figure out how to live life and how to share that with everybody else. To being okay in a place where I was investing more in my personal relationships. So I see that NFJ, and I also see the Enneagram coin on that as well, because I think realistically, NFJs tend to be people when you get invested, you are invested with people. And when people bounce, it's hurtful because you're putting in a lot of this investment, and other people don't think the same way often, and they do bounce.
100%. Yes. Yeah. And then it's like, I don't want to fault them. Like my INFJ friend had to tell me recently, like, hey man, like I know that you're kind of like confused about so-and-so who happens to be an ESFP, but at the same time, you got to understand that she really like relationships, like not everyone has relationships as their central focus of their mind.
Mhm.
Like she's out here pursuing, like trying to do this and do that and do that. And her negligence of you has nothing to do with you as a person. It's like, and it's like stuff that I knew, but I guess I have to like be reminded of like, yeah, it's not that people don't care about me or about relationships, but there's just, even with what my wife said, it's like, oh, like, I mean, I care about relationships, but I'm focused on, getting this and everything's like that. I understand. And don't get it twisted. If I ended up with like, 1 million subscribers, or if I ended up like famous, like a famous actor or something like that, I'm happy with that. But at the bare minimum, like that's not something that, like, what I really, really need is just intimacy. Because then I feel like I've impacted the group of small people that I have around me, and they all each cause their own ripples out into the world. But 3 is my integration as a 9, so I need a little bit more of that like drive that you have. Like I gotta become more influential. I gotta
See, I'm
start.
working backwards. Like, okay, you don't have to be hot shit all the time. Like, it's okay to want simple things sometimes. That's not wrong. And as a 3, like that's not my natural inclination. It's to run towards something that makes me feel valuable. And to feel valuable, I need to give value to as many people as I can. And that's not necessarily true, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And if you're focused on the wrong things for the wrong reasons, it's not going to be fulfilling. So, but that's my integration, especially as a social 3, a wing 2 social 3, is not caring so much what everybody else thinks and saying, what do I really want? And I got caught up in this when I was running my business, because I said since I was 12 I was going to be a dog trainer. And I was a dog rehabilitator, worked mostly with nervous, anxious, fearful, and aggressive dogs. And I was going for a year, and I hadn't had a day off in over a year. And I finally sat down with an INFP friend of mine, and we were discussing Enneagram and we were discussing type, and I realized I'm not happy. Like, I've accomplished it. I set the goal. I accomplished it. I pulled a profit in my first year. That's the 3 sideways bragging me. Like, I did the thing, and I wasn't happy by the end of it. But that had become such a part of my identity to be a business owner and to work with these dogs and to be in the groups that I was, that letting go of that, especially as a 3, was so hard for me. So I kind of see, I don't know, I see Myers-Briggs as kind of the shape and Enneagram as the color. There's various shades of ENFJs, which is why I love a format like this, is to just see
Exactly.
the vast differences within a specific type. I find to be fascinating.
Yeah, like Cam is the only ENFJ 7 here, I believe, and then Tina's ENFJ 6, and you see the differences. And then even between you and Emrys, and then Jessica, like Jessica and Emrys are sexual 3s, so they might even have like the same drive for like things in life and everything, but at the same time, like it's coming from a different angle, right? Which it's like when you look at all of these different fillets, like that's kind of what a video like this is supposed to do. Like people watching, like, I always thought of ENFJs as just like Oprah, but it's like,
Right.
well, there's some that are kind of like this. You know, if Stephanie was here from the slumber party, like she's an ENFJ 5, very different than, you know, the Oprah kind of ENFJ and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I mean, we all do turn into Oprah at a full moon, so there's.
Well, we kind of already talked about this. So, Kinsey, you could still pop us off, but what's y'all's relationship with setting goals, planning, and peering into the future, or like predicting events?
I have a lot of thoughts on this, especially because I am a 3 and I'm very goal oriented. And I'm a fairly structured person. So I like to say I enjoy spontaneity, provided it's carefully planned. Like I can be spontaneous, but I need to know when I'm going to be back and when I'm going to go so that I know what my obligations for everyone is in between. I don't mind being spontaneous whatsoever, as long as I know I can fulfill all of my other obligations that I've already promised to other people, because people are counting on me to get stuff done. But as far as like predicting events and planning, I've really come to think that people overvalue what you can do in a year and plan too far to what you can do in 10 years. But I find like that 5-year mark is really, really undervalued. Like there's so much that can happen in a 5-year span that you can get a bigger vision on. But 10 years, like I love to theorize about it, but realistically, I thought I was going to be a dog trainer. I became a dog trainer. If I had kept going based on my plan, I would still be a dog trainer and I would be miserable. You know, there's so many things that can happen in that big of a span of time. But within like that 5-year mark, that's kind of where I find the sweet spot to be. I remember when I was getting to know my husband, who is a double feminine ISTP, which is why I love ISTPs. So guilty there. I met him when I was 15, and I had a very specific vision of who I wanted in a guy because I wanted someone that I could grow a family with, that would support me, that would be open to my religious beliefs. Like I had kind of a list, and even as a 15-year-old, I wasn't messing around because I knew what I wanted to achieve what I needed. And within 5 years of meeting him, we were married. So started like I didn't know in 5 years that was going to happen, but my thought process was I don't want to waste my time. I want to be intentional with what I'm going to do. But on a smaller scale, like on a day-to-day scale, and this is the big difference between like my husband and myself. I love that he can chill. Like ISTPs are so good at just being able to not stress. If you ask my husband, like one of my biggest weaknesses is I'm a chronic stressor. Like I'm a planner. I need to get things done for myself and for other people. But when we were pouring the pad for our foundation, it was getting close. It was in the fall, close to this last winter, up in northern Idaho. So it gets really cold here. And I had already planned based on the weather, like the people were coming to pour it the next week because I knew if it didn't get done in time, it was going to freeze. But by the time it got that close to the end, like he didn't stress about it at all until the very end. And he's like, oh, this is never going to get done. We're going to have to pay way more for it to not freeze. It's never going to happen. Are the finances there? I'm like, I thought about all of this like a month ago. They're coming next week. It's like it's already taken care of. So I stressed that amount of time, right? But then it was done. And so that's kind of like smaller scale looking into future events, I guess, and planning. Like I'd already planned for the what ifs and the idea that the temperature is likely going to get colder, so this is going to need to be done, where he could chill until the very end, and then he got like super stressed, but it was already taken care of. So that's why we make such a good team, is because it's about that balance, right? So anyways, again, very long-winded, but the big takeaway I think is like we overestimate what we can do in a year. I think that's why a lot of us fail New Year's resolutions, is because we want to do it all, and that's not realistic to change so fast. But then undervalue what we can do in 5. And I think that 5-year mark is really where that sweet spot is. So yeah, I'll pass it over to Jessica.
Okay, so I was thinking more about the long-term goals, I think. Because with short-term planning, I'm more like just taking a list of things I have to do, and then just I'm not like SI type of planner, of course. So I'm just taking like a general list of things I have to do, and then just try to manage. But when it comes to like setting goals and like long-term planning, I think I just constantly like reevaluate what my goal is. It doesn't change a lot nowadays. It's changed throughout my life, but now it's more constant. And I try to just like move towards it. And whenever I see like a occasion to throw another stepping stone, I just do it. So yeah, I kind of go to the light. I don't know, like I see the light in the end of the tunnel, and to this light I'm going to.
I resonate with that so seriously. It's like, okay, I just see where I want to be at.
Yeah.
And then my intuition is just kind of
Yeah.
like guiding me there eventually. Like every action that I'm making in life, it's like, okay, is this a detour or is this going to get me closer to that
Yeah.
light over there? I don't know how I'm going to get there, but if I focus all of my mind on that light, eventually I'm going to be there. And then by the time I'm there, there's another light that I'm like shooting for. But yeah, that's cool.
Exactly. Yeah, so then I just like try to find all the stepping stones that I need to throw, and then just like go towards it. And yeah, and the light, it's not like something very defined. It's more like a general idea of what I want to do in life, I think, and then I just try to adjust.
All right. Well, so I'm demon NI in OP terms, so planning is not exactly my forte. But I guess what I'll say about planning is that, and how my growth path for that is often sort of like looking back at my life and seeing like the patterns of myself and learning to trust that those things are going to continue to keep happening. Like I'm going to continue to flub up my plans in the same sorts of ways and not be so optimistic that the way I set out for this plan to go is going to go exactly like that, because I'm a human, not a robot, kind of a thing. Um, so I definitely see that as something that I'm learning in terms of planning, just in general. Like, say I have something at work that I'm need to accomplish. I'll think like, oh well, I just like write this code, and then I push it up, and it's done. But there's like usually back and forth, refining requirements, all that kind of stuff takes like work in trying to track down like who's the person that can actually tell me what I need to code, right? So there's usually questions that come up, and like allowing the space into my plan to accept that those things are going to go wrong is the kind of stuff I think about. So Kinsey's over here talking about 5 years. I'm thinking about like 2 weeks, because that's how my sprint planning works at my developer job. So that's something I'm like constantly iterating on and trying to get better at, and not be so hard on myself about as well, because I can often screw that up and just be overly optimistic or otherwise. So I guess the other thing with planning is getting too many. Again, with the optimistic side of myself, I might overly invest. It seems like Kinsey's a little bit better about managing multiple commitments and making sure that you leave one and go to the next. That's something I'm definitely struggling with. So I don't know what my point is for that, but that's definitely something I'm like seeing and like trying to manage for myself as well. So maybe I'll reach out to her for advice.
Yeah, I suck at planning. I suck. Like I'm just, that's not how I'm built. That color and shape analogy you made earlier, Kinsey, it's brilliant, because we might both be squares, but I'm definitely like a chartreuse, and you're like a hardcore aquamarine. Like I don't like I. For me, it's very difficult for me to confine myself to a schedule or to a plan, it feels painful. It feels like a constraint. My boss up here, he's an engineer turned pastor, and is very methodical, very type A, very structured and systematic with everything that he does. And sometimes, like planning an event with him, because we're both he's a good friend of mine too, and we're both very creative, both very outgoing. But sometimes planning an idea with him is like I want to jump off a cliff, because it's like I'm thinking, okay, how can we get an explosion, right? Like, how can we get grenades to fall from the sky? And he's like, okay, but the velocity of the grenades need to fall at a specific angle. And I'm like, oh man, this it's like it's not fun anymore. At this point, it's not fun. And so I've had to train myself, and I've grown quite a bit, like teaching myself to sort of constrain myself in the beginning to give myself the freedom later on. So, like for instance, one of the things that I was trying to do when I first started working with him was in my calendar, like putting every little detail that I needed to do for all of the things that I needed to get done. And he looked at my calendar one week and he was like, hey, why don't you try doing this instead? So he actually had me block out spaces in my day for me to do whatever. Like I have like an hour in my day every day to be creative, or I have an hour in my day to just call somebody that I just want to hang out with, or to write some music, or to work on a new graphic, or whatever. And it's sort of that planned spontaneity that you were talking about earlier. And like I found a lot of freedom in that, not as much as I would like, because it's still like it takes energy for me to do that. But that's sort of been helpful as far as the structuring of everything. As far as like planning and or future goal orientation, I tend to be less concerned about the person I want to be, as opposed to like the impact I want to have. And so it's a lot less attractive for me to like come up with a 10-step or 5-year process to get to a place in life that I'd like to be at, as opposed to meander through life, experiencing all of the possible things that I possibly can, and then picking the individual fruits out of the myriad of experiences and saying, oh, this is awesome, I'll be able to use this, kind of tuck it away for later, and then just discard the rest. I'm a Christian. I don't know if you guys are religious at all, but like it's very common. What's up? It's very common for Christians and people that grow up in church to pray to God and ask him to open doors. I find that's a really bad prayer for me. So one of my mottos is I don't pray for him to open doors. I pray that he slams them in my face. And the doors that are left open, I'm going to run through, because not only is that natural for me, that's like an inclination, but I find that when I run through the doors that I believe he's open, good things happen. And when he slams them in my face, I have no choice but to abort mission and kind of head towards the light, like you were saying, Jess. So yeah, I'm not great at planning. I'm not great at being goal oriented, but I also feel like it's worked out pretty well for me. And so now I'm working with somebody who is a planner and is very goal oriented, and I'm trying it out. I'm just trying it out, seeing what happens. I'll let you know in 5 years.
So for me, I'm really good at like planning. Like I literally write in my journal. I like writing, so I literally just plan stuff out so I could like have a good like outline and stuff, and then I start implementing those steps to accomplish my goals. Yeah, so like I like to have a schedule. Like I can't do like spontaneous things, well, kind of a little bit, but I tend to overthink a lot, so I try to introspect a lot and just have a calendar or just write the things that I need to do. Like I like to have control basically. I feel like if I don't have control, like if there's anything I don't like, is ambiguity. Like, yeah, I can't deal with that. I need to know what's gonna happen. So those are my thoughts. I'm really good at planning stuff out. But
That is really interesting, Vicky, because
uh-huh,
I plan, but
uh-huh,
I keep most of my plans in my head and then I juggle them around based on what the expectations are.
uh-huh,
I've done like a actual planner before, but I'm not great at writing things out unless it's something I'm struggling with, like, okay, I need
uh-huh.
to work out tomorrow morning. Let's schedule my workout. For the most part, I keep it up here. So that's another really interesting color, especially between you and Cam, like Cam
Mhm.
being a 7. That was a really great difference between the two. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just thought that was a really interesting take because it is really structured and
Yeah.
something that I aspire to do more because I think that that could be helpful. But yeah, very interesting.
Yeah,
I
like
just
for
wanted to
me, like
touch on
there's
that.
just certain things that like I need to write down and some others don't. Like you said, like I have a vision already in my head and I could implement that vision already, but it's just some things I don't. And I tend to overthink, so I also need to write down. Like I said, I really struggle with ambiguity. Like I like to know like certain things, certain outcomes. Like I literally play out multiple scenarios and how these scenarios will foreplay in the future and how like things will be affected based on if I change this or I change that, how these things or certain people will be affected based on this certain like vision that I have.
Vicky, that's so wild because like honestly, the ambiguity is the fun to me.
Yeah.
Like it's and so I guess I really don't understand what it means to be an ENFJ. I think because I honestly in my head I'm thinking an ENFJ because of the people that I've met are just are they're fine with going with the flow. Like that's how I think about an ENFJ. Like somebody who's interested enough to be objective enough in a situation to read somebody up and down and be empathetic enough to figure them out and kind of go with the flow. That's a very I'm an idiot, remember that, but like that's what I think of when I think of an ENFJ, and obviously that's untrue.
It's definitely not true. We don't always have everything together, at least I don't.
Trust me, I don't have nothing together. I'm saying like I'm saying just the simple fact that you have an outline and that you play out every scenario in your head, that's foreign to me. Like it's very foreign for me to play out every scenario in my head. I'll jump head first into the pool and hope I don't break my neck. But that's part of the fun, right? Like it's just cool that we're different.
I was gonna ask real quickly, Vicky, what was your Enneagram again?
I'm a 2W3.
Got you. And then with Cam, I was gonna ask, Kinsey, don't forget what you were gonna say.
I won't.
Did you see, like, how did, I guess, from an external perspective, because we were always in the same group. So your perception of ENFJ, did you see me in that way? Like, did I seem more of like a planner, go with the flow, or?
Now that I think about it, you were, I wouldn't have called you a planner, but you were definitely like, what's that show? Jordan Peele had a show that just got canceled on HBO. I can't think of the name of it. Whatever. It was a horror show, a horror like series just got canceled. Regardless, at the end of it, there's this scene where like they go into this weird world, and there's this person who's called, I think, the Timekeeper. It's been a while since I watched it. And basically, their whole existence is seeing every path that takes. And then they relay that information as they see fit. I'm sorry, that's not Jordan Peterson's show. That's Loki from whatever. But like he meets the guy who sees everything, and it's always happening, and it's always being updated, and he's always aware of it. That's more how I thought of you, but not in the sense of planning for like the avoidance of something to happen, but mere for the simple exercise of it, like the exercise of trying to figure out what was going to happen next, which I think is slightly different. It wasn't to prepare necessarily for like catastrophe, but it was just the simple exercise of figuring out what a person is thinking, why they're thinking it, and what outcomes would happen because of it.
That's actually spot on. Yeah, because I see myself as kind of like a Doctor Strange from the Marvel movies, where it's just like, I believe him to be an ENTJ, so he would have NI in the same position. It's like, I'm seeing all of the possibilities of where things can go. And then I bring in like the Raymond Reddington, where it's like, okay, I think that's the path that I most want things to go. And I'll influence it in a way. Like my thing is, I want to influence things to go the way that I have it in my head without it seeming like I did that. So for me, the planning and all that comes like very socially. So when I'm thinking like long term, like, okay, this is what I want to do, and this is my career, and yada yada yada, that's not as much of what I'm thinking in that sense. I kind of, like I said, I'm just going toward the light, like, okay, I want to be this, so I'm gonna aim that way. But when it comes to like social strategy and like, okay, these are the results that I want, and these are the dominoes that I have to set up and then knock over at this time, and this is when I should do that. Oh, let me tell Cam this. He's most likely going to tell this person that in this moment, and then like, so yeah, that's kind of how it's going to go. It's like, or if I see something happening, then it's like, oh, got to speed up to see what's going to happen like 20 minutes or 3 hours from now, maybe even 2 days to a week from now. And then I have to like figure out what I'm going to do in between to kind of play my part in that role. But yeah, I think that also what you were talking about was Lovecraft Country.
That's it. That's the
Yeah,
one.
and it was because it was the same guy who actually was, if anybody's watching, it was an INTJ main character. I believe he was an INTJ at least. But he's the same guy that played at the last episode of Loki, who I do believe that like he was kind of like a very, I don't actually remember if I typed him as ENFJ or not, but he definitely had that thing where it's like he could see everything and what was going to happen, and he was like playing around in that way. So that's probably why he got them confused, because it was the same actor. But yeah,
Gotcha.
still had that same kind of thing of like seeing what would be possible in the future. But yeah. Emrys?
Yeah, I think it's dope. No, I don't have nothing else to say. Emrys is much smarter than me. Keep going. Keep going.
I somewhat doubt that. Planning and long-term goals have interestingly been, and in a difficult way, blessedly been probably the biggest source of challenge and catalyst for growth in my life. And along the way, a major source of difficulty. And I think that it comes down to like two ways that I tend to relate to planning. I have an inherent like perfectionism. Well, I don't want to say inherent. I have a perfectionism that may be the result of like conditioning, or maybe something about my personality that makes it so I have a very difficult time like leaping forward into a plan until I know exactly what I want and have like a confidence that I've figured out like the most efficient way to get to that thing. And so that tends to lead to like freezing up about long-term plans, because it's like you can't know that most of the time. And on top of that, I have a very difficult time seeing, I have had a very difficult time seeing what it is I truly want. That's getting better recently for a few reasons I'll explain, but like it's been very challenging to differentiate between like expectations placed on me, like cultural conditioning, like things that I enjoy and things that I enjoy, but they're not necessarily a part of like my deepest desires. Like all of that feels very much like the exact opposite of FI, where I often marvel at FI users where it's like, wow, what's it like to just know, or have like an intuitive sense of authenticity and like an intuitive connection to what's your core or essence, because that's often very difficult for me to see. And I've learned that usually I'm already acting it out in the world without really realizing it, but it makes it difficult to choose what paths to pursue, because it's like, what do I want to act in accordance with who I truly am, but it's hard to see that consciously. The other challenge that I face is that I've described it as if like, imagine you had a superpower for years where you could just create objects out of thin air, or you were living in the Matrix for a long time and you could just like type up a code for whatever building or object that you needed, and then suddenly you dropped into a space where you did not have that ability. And to me, that is a big part of my experience of like planning, because I can see it all in my head. And then I've noticed that while I'm very good at the inner world navigations, both emotionally and mentally, applying that in the outer world, it's like I go to apply it in the outer world and suddenly like I'm tripping over things and I'm like, what? I don't know where I'm going. Or it'll be like, this feels weird. Like the whole thing is there, and I can like we were talking about 10 years versus 5 years. It's like I can see the whole thing like 10 years from now, and then trying to apply it, it's like, wait, I don't know that I know how to build, like the Matrix scene where they create like tons of guns. It's like, I don't know that I know how to build a rifle like piece by piece slowly. I can see like how all the pieces would fit together, but I don't know like how to put that into action all the time. The main things that I've found to help with that, I've kind of been drawn to spiritual practices that are focused on like achieving a certain internal result that also results in a certain external result. So like what I mainly use that for is to try to accelerate, how do I put this? Like, one, to motivate me, because I'm very motivated by the internal world. And so bringing the internal world to bear on the external by intertwining the two is really motivational and beautiful. It makes me feel like I'm actually connecting with reality, because there are many times where I feel like the underlying beauty and wonder of reality is something I can access internally. But then there's not a lot of things that I feel like very strongly connect to that core passion of mine externally. And so I have a hard time figuring out like, how to sustain motivation when I'm like, I just want to bring a certain kind of energy or presence into the world, or a certain way of experiencing the world. I've described it as like wanting to be like Elrond from Lord of the Rings, where he's just like chilling in Rivendell, where it's super beautiful, and he's just like helping people with healing as they come along. And there's this healing environment, and then like this healing that he's giving out. And so it's been hard for me to figure out what exactly does that look like in the external world. So tying those two things together has been really helpful. And then it also has been helpful in figuring out that like, what is it I truly want? Because having that often difficult to sort through, I've found this alternative approach where it's like doing that work internally, where you're accelerating the rate at which you're experiencing the thing you're chasing, or the thing you're pursuing as a goal, and then like having that thing, or some version of it, experienced more quickly. It's like, oh, okay, so I got a taste of that. Okay, do I actually want that? It's kind of like, I'm trying to avoid the situation where it's like, oh, I've gotten several years down the line, I'm not actually happy being a dog trainer, right? Where you're like, oh, that isn't what I actually wanted. And so what I found helpful is accelerating the pace at which I start experiencing that thing, and then I strongly evaluate it and be like, is that actually making me happy? The other thing that's led to is a more clear definition of like what it means to be my authentic self in the world. And I think that has helped guide me a lot, because it's changed from like I want this specific result, or I have to pick a very specific result, and that will like make me feel like I'm being authentic, a very specific activity or goal. And it's changed to like a sort of constant attempt to share the love of the universe or of God or whatever you want to call it, with others as it's known internally to me. And that involves like self-knowledge and being able to like open yourself to others without hesitation, and being able to sort of radiate the essence or heart of who and what you are. And I found that because I started intertwining the spiritual practices with the physical pursuits, it's like the spiritual practices would push me more towards that. I'd be going after like a regular physical pursuit, or a physical goal. And either as I achieved it or as I was seeking it, the spiritual practice involved in it would like push me more towards, is that really in line with your essence? Much faster than it was before. So that's been good. I'm still very much learning, but it's been like I started out this diatribe with. It's like that's been the main source of growth and challenge for me in life, which I see as kind of a central point of life, to be challenged and receive catalyst for growth. So I'm grateful for it.
Okay, so with this question, I see, like I took it 2 ways. So the first way is, of course, like on an everyday scale. So with that, I'm pretty like rigid. Like I want to have, my to-do list and all that stuff. So, just the regular J stuff. But when we're talking like a 5 to 10 year plan, I really realized that, like, honestly, a lot of things don't happen. Like for me, it was real life stuff that hit me that really made me go, you can't plan 5 to 10 years. So like, for example, like my mom's death was one, me having like a really bad health issue was one, and obviously COVID being a thing, right? So for me, it's like everything that you think about in the future, it's not promised. There's just so many factors that come into play that affect your plan, your planning, your long-term goals. So for me, I heard this podcast and it really stuck with me. He goes like, when you're driving, right? Like, and if you're driving like in a really dark path, your lights are just shining on the sign that says like 40 kilometers ahead, like Collingwood. And as you pass each kilometer, it'll tell you you're closer to your destination. And that's how I see my goal planning. For me, for example, like if I want to be in a career 5 years from now, what am I doing today to take me there? Make it small. It doesn't have to be over the top, because you're gonna take detours. So make that goal really small. Yeah, like for example, for me, like I'm trying to work on like reducing my stomach flubber. Right now it's called Joseph. I'm trying to downgrade it to like Joey, like a younger brother. So for me, it's like, okay, you don't have to like think a year ahead. Like, how am I gonna do this? So, like, okay, so sorry, that joke was just so corny. But okay, like for example, when you're working out, like I don't think about a year's plan. I think about, let's do 10 sit-ups today so that tomorrow I can do 15. So then tomorrow I can do 20. And you'll gradually see that change. So I don't like to think a year ahead, like, oh yeah, how am I going to plan my meals? Or like, I have to have this really intense Chloe Ting kind of like, workout. I don't need any of that. It's the small stuff that leads me to the bigger picture. And doing that has caused me so much less stress, and I'm cool with that. So that's how I'm happy with that. I mean, real life things just punching me into reality. I'm like, yeah, I just got to change my routine, and I've been happy ever since.
Yo, that is facts. I think that goes right along with what me and Jessica were saying, with like just following the light. Because yeah, that's really how it is. It's like, okay, I see the vision there, and I don't know, like my New Year's resolution was pretty much to not have a New Year's resolution. So it's very paradoxical in a way. But it's like, I'm not about to be like, oh yeah, Denzel, you got to go into the gym every single day because you have to do this. Or I'm not going to push myself to do almost anything, but it's more so just knowing what I do want. And then as I'm going through life, whenever I see materials that, like, if I'm trying to like build something, if I come through everyday life's materials to help me with, oh, this is the thing that I'm trying to build, then I just have to keep an eye out for those things. So the plan is not, oh, I'm going to run into this, I'm going to go searching for this ingredient tomorrow, and then I'm going to go buy this ingredient on Tuesday, and but it's more of like, I know that at the end of the day, I want to make a cake. And so I know all the ingredients that are necessary, or at least most of them. And as I'm going through life, I'm like, oh, you know what? That's actually going to go really well with my cake. Whoa, I didn't even think that would have made the cake better, but I think I might actually throw that in there too. And I'm just always constantly thinking, is this getting me closer to that cake that I want? So that way it's not so rigid, but it's like I'm still feeling like every single day I'm getting closer to that thing that I have. And I think that's for me, like that's intuition, because it's like I'm just I'm following that intuition along life. And no matter what happens, like if COVID happens, if God forbid, there's a death in the family or whatever, that's not going to stop me from finding the ingredients that I'm going to be needing every day, because whatever path that I'm walking on, I'm going to find ingredients. I'm going to find tools and materials that are going to continue to help me to build that ultimate thing that I want.
Question.
It also goes back to like kind of like what Cam was saying too. Like I really used to like I love the idea of like how God just controls everything in my life. And so I'd really be like, even when it came to like dating women, Like if a girl maybe would say no to me or something, it's like, okay, God just didn't want me to be with them. It just wasn't meant to be. So I had like a fatalistic type of like, I'm going to work as if it depends on me, but I'm going to pray as if it depends on God kind of thing, and just let God handle, you know, whatever it might be. So like if the door closes in my face, I'm like, oh, good. That means it wasn't for me. I was about to probably waste time, you know? And I just love the idea, lastly, of I think Elliot Hulse said that successful people don't always make the right decisions, but they make their decisions right. And so it's like, no matter what you chose to do, at the end of the day, that was the right thing for you to do. And you have to believe that it was divinely orchestrated for you to be doing that at that moment, so that, because it's part of the ingredients that you're going to get at the end of the day. So yeah, I love that, Tina.
Question for Tina and DZ, and myself, vis-a-vis y'all too. Do you think what you said at the end there, or at the beginning of what you were saying, is a cop-out? The idea of walking through life believing that the answers are going to come to you in the way that they should. And even if that is true, is that worth elongating the timeline with which you could be productive, successful, whatever you want to say it? To keep your analogy, right, of a cake, right? A cake. And you're walking through a grocery store and you're thinking, that could be good. Oh, wow, that could be great. Wouldn't it make more sense to follow a recipe, right? And so it's like, for me, I tend to think the way you think. But part of me believes that the reason I think that way, or the reason I operate the way that I do, is because it's just easier. It's easier to go through a grocery store and just point at all the things that look interesting, throw them in a bowl, and hope something delicious comes out. But it definitely makes more sense to follow a recipe. So what do you think?
You have an answer?
I'll let you go.
Okay. To me, it's like, as long as I have a goal, again, that light thing, as long as I have a light and I'm moving toward it, it's not a cop-out to me. Like the moment that I stop moving, that's when now all of a sudden, this is a problem. If I stop moving, or if I find a detour, that's not going to eventually like lead me like closer. Like, I think that's one difference, in my opinion, between like NJs and like NPs. Like, even if maybe they might have like a light, like the NPs, in my opinion, like they're taking so many different detours. And they'll shift whatever that light is. Like, they're not really fixated on that light. But for me, it's like, no, I'm gonna build a cake. Like, I'm making a cake at the end of the day. And that's not changing. That's what I'm being rigid about. But the ingredients that are gonna go in the cake, well, that's what I'm not gonna be so rigid about. So if I have that recipe, then I think that it might be productive, because I'm more focused on like, these are the exact things that are gonna go in my cake. But then I think it's also kind of like not opening me up to the things that might have been even better to go into the cake. So it's good to have like at least enough of a recipe to where it's like, okay, no, these are the things generally that I want in my cake. But then all of a sudden I'm walking through the grocery store, it's like, yo, I didn't know they made these Cinnamon Toast Crunch things. That actually might be better. I think I might get that. But if I was fixated on just going through this, I wouldn't even probably even like looked at that, you know? So I think that that's kind of like how I see, like, at the end of the day, I'm still going to get my goal accomplished. But the things that went into it, that's where there's a difference. So to me, I don't really see it as a cop-out, because I'm still forever going to be fixated on the goal, and I'm still always going to be moving toward it. I'm not going to allow myself to remain stagnant. It's like how Tina was saying, like, oh, you know, what am I doing today? Yeah, I'm not going to have a, oh yeah, tomorrow kind of thing. No. What am I doing today? Even us doing this video is like, okay, this is getting me closer to this light. This is getting me closer to understanding. Like, everything that I do in life will have a purpose to get me closer to that light. And the moment that I lose that purpose, then that's where it's like, oh, I'm just an aimless person that's flying in the wind. And that to me is a little bit too perceiver-like, too loose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think for me, and I'm sorry that I keep making it all about myself, but like, I think the hard part the hard part for me in my experience is measuring out like which one is worth more in which situation. Like, yes, like yes, I hear what you're saying, DZ, because that's probably my that's when I'm in neutral. That's kind of how I operate. But also, if I look back at every experience where I've ever been detailed enough to actually plan something out in advance, it's never worked out any less than the alternative. If anything, it's worked out better. But I've never enjoyed the process more when I've planned things out detailed in a detailed way rather than when I've been shooting from the hip, right? Like, and so it's like, do you determine what you do based upon the enjoyment that you get out of it, or based upon the timeline that you could shorten? Like, what if I could make that 5-year plan instead of that 10-year plan, right? Like Kenzie was saying. I don't know. And so I never know which one to kind of lean into. I know what works, and I know what I like.
For real quick, Vicky said that she had to go, but thanks for coming out, Vicky.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Bye, guys.
Bye.
It
Nice
was
meeting
nice
you.
to see you
Bye.
guys. I appreciate it. Until next
Bye.
time. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
And then, so Cam, yeah, like I think for me, what I'd say is like, maybe for me, it's like I also have fun. Like the way that you said, like, oh, it's not fun for me to like really go, like into the details and like all of that. For me, that is fun. So both of them are pretty fun. I guess it depends on the goal for me. So it's like, if I need to like make it like to put in that work, to put in the details and everything like that, that's not a problem for me. It's just like, do I care enough to do it? And if it's a goal that's like, oh yeah, I really do care enough to do it, or like there's more people involved and whatnot, then it's like, all right, let's go ahead and do it, because at the end of the day, I'm pretty proficient at that. Yeah. So I guess that's the thing for me. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Okay, so for me, like I like how you made the cake analogy. Let me say this: cake is cake. So if I plan to make a red velvet cake and I mess it up, and I'm like, oh crap, I still want a cake though because it's sweet. Okay, I'll make a carrot cake. At the end of the day, I might not have gotten my initial dream or wish, but at the end of the day, though, I got what I was craving: sugar. I say this because I was in this predicament. So I graduated HR from HR, the program. I studied human resources, and I never ended up in a job that I wanted to. I'm actually in fraud in insurance, and I'm like, I studied this for 4 years. Why am I in insurance fraud? But you know what? I'm really thankful because I learned things that I never learned from studying HR. So at the end of the day, I'm really grateful for, it doesn't matter what role I'm at. As long as I'm learning the skills to take me to the next level, I'm okay with that. So to me, even if, the plan didn't go as I wanted to, I'm learning something in between. So I'm cool with everything. I'm going to, like, gratitude to me at the end of the day is what helps carry me. Because when something, kind of goes off track, it's disheartening. But what can we do about it? We got to find the light. And that's how I've always navigated life.
For the next question, how often do you need time alone, and what does that look like?
I had to talk with my INFJ mom about this to get some perspective, because even when I'm alone, I keep myself busy to the point where I'm not alone. Like I'll be watching YouTube videos, or I'll be studying a language, or I'll be doing something. I like to have conversations with people when they're not there. Just like one of my good friends is an INFJ, and I'll pretend that she's there so that I can have a conversation. I'm in OP type blast and then play, and play is all about bouncing ideas off of other people. So if I literally don't have another person there, I will pretend I have another person there just so that I can talk it out. For me, the definition really of being alone is alone with my own thoughts. So it's outside of SE, because even if there aren't people around, I keep myself busy. And that's one, the SE, and the other, the 3 in me. I need to stay in action, because if I don't, I'll emotion might come my way, and I don't really want to deal with that because that's not very efficient. So getting into that NI and TI space where it's more about me feels selfish to prioritize. And rationally, I know it's not, because you need to be able to spend that time with yourself to be able to give more to other people. But on a day-to-day basis, it feels selfish to take time for myself just to sit with my thoughts and to not be in action. But I also know when I do that, I am the healthiest version of myself. When I was probably 17 is when I did it the most. Every night before I went to bed, my environment needed to be clean because I wanted order in my environment so I wasn't distracted. My carpet was vacuumed, the lights were off, there's just one candle and my silky bathrobe, and I'd sit in the middle of my bedroom floor with a little bit of music playing, solely so that I could just process and journal. And that was it. So realistically, I need that every day. How often do I do that? Almost never. Almost never. Because that's not where I naturally want to go. I naturally want to get things done and meet other people's expectations and make sure tomorrow's going great, and that all of the pieces that I'm juggling are taken care of. And one of those pieces should be prioritizing my alone time with myself. So I acknowledge it's an issue because I don't do it. And I know I'm healthy when I do. Um, I mean, I can spend time with people. I can spend time alone. If I go more than a couple of days without physically seeing another person, I've got to get out of the house because I need energy, even if it's just one person. That if it's a stage and there's 1,000 people, that's great too. Like for me, it doesn't really matter as long as I can connect somehow with what's going on. But alone time, I should be having daily, and I maybe do it monthly if I'm lucky. Probably quarterly, if I'm being totally honest. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jessica. But that's just kind of how I wanted to define alone time, because even when I'm alone, I'm not alone, because I'll still fill it with things I need to do and people to talk to and things to learn and listen to.
Let me interrupt just before she jumps in. Kinsey, everything you said, like 100% down the line, everything. Like I don't need to even take my turn. It felt like you were taking the words out of my throat. Like it was just, that was really cool to hear.
So do you want to just say whatever you were going to say right now before Jessica, or?
Yeah, sure. Like, it's just super short, Jess. I'm sorry. This feels a lot ruder now that I'm in it. You said, Kinsey, there was one thing that you said that I didn't necessarily feel. It was about, spending time with yourself. It felt selfish. To me, that doesn't feel, the reason I don't do it is not because it feels selfish. It just almost feels pointless or not worth the results. So like you said, rationally, obviously it's worth it. Realistically and practically, it's like, but the emotional work that I'll have to put into this is just so draining. And oh my gosh, like there's people in Ukraine dying right now. Like, why am I thinking about my emotional state? Like, it's just, who cares? Like, it's like there's other things going on. So actually, now that I say it out loud, maybe that is a little bit of selfishness. Maybe that's why I feel so averse to it. But for me, it's just more like, whatever, suck it up. There's other things going on that I would rather spend my time. But other than that, like line upon line, precept upon precept, what you said, I agreed with.
Yeah, the 3 and the 7, avoiding the internal world. Jessica?
Yeah, I think I partially agree with that partially, because when I was last week on a study mission and met for 4 days 70 people that I didn't know, I had to interact them almost like 24/7. It was like so crazy. I don't know. Like I just needed like at least like 1 hour to just like, I don't know, like analyze what was happening and like what people I met and like to whom I talked to and stuff. But then when I sometimes went on like alone travels or something and had like a lots of NITI time, I think I still needed to at least like from time to time grab the phone and like connect someone. Like I need to like know that I can call someone or text someone. So I don't know, I just need to know that I can talk to someone if I want to, even if I'm per se alone. So I'm alone, but I'm not alone, if that makes sense. Yeah. So and I don't know if like a week ago when I was a bit overwhelmed with the amount of people that I've met and like total strangers, it was maybe more sensory overload than just like meeting people, because I still like to meet people, but like there were just so many and I didn't know them, and it's just like crazy and loud and stuff. So maybe it was more like sensory overload than just people. So yeah. Kinsey.
I wanted to touch on that just super briefly because I remember this being a big eye-opening thing for me 2 years ago. I'm on the extroverted spectrum. I'm very extroverted, if you can't tell. Like I'm a talker. I love to talk. I love to do things. And I had this friend who is a double masculine ESTP. We met in a restaurant. She's just a lovely gal. But I would go out with her and I would just feel drained by the end of it, just like totally drained. And I was trying to talk with my mom, like, am I an ENFJ? Like, I thought I was the most extroverted person I knew. That's what a lot of people have said. Oh, well, Kinsey's great, but she's a lot. I've gotten that quite a bit. And I realized we are extroverted in totally different ways. Because when I was hanging out with her, we were going to a bar, or we were going to the gym, or we were going and we were doing something to the point where I was getting frustrated without realizing it because I couldn't talk. Like, you can't talk when there's a whole bunch of music and everyone's drinking in a bar. And I would be the one like at the end of the bar with the guy who's just brokenhearted, and I'm like, he's like, what's the meaning of life? Like, that's where I ended up, was at the end of the bar talking to the brokenhearted guy. And I still remember that so vividly. I was taken out for my 21st and I ended up at the bar chatting with the dude that was there, you know. But having gone through that situation with her, I realized, oh, I'm getting SE'd out. I'm getting extroverted sensing out because I'm not able to do this blasting, because that's what I lead with. I want to teach, I want to blast, I want to talk, I want to exchange ideas, I want to build relationship, and I don't do that just through doing things. So I just got burnt out extroverting a totally different way.
Yeah, that's facts, Kinsey, for sure. There's just definitely different types of extroverts, and you know, I made a video on my channel on who's the most extroverted type. And I know that people very frequently say that, oh, you know, the ENFP is the most introverted of the extroverts. And it's no offense to ENFPs, but no, absolutely not. Like, from the way that I view them, at least, it's like, of course, you know, if you're viewing extroversion in the sense of like maybe they don't need people to engage in all of that, for sure. But if you're viewing like extroversion and like the like, you know, I'm just gonna say a whole bunch of ideas and thoughts and everything and bounce things off the wall, and then I'm gonna be like,
oh man, I'm so drained from all of the things that I've said. I need to go and retreat for like 2 weeks.
It's like, okay, does that really make them the most introverted of the extroverts, or did they just not pace themselves and they burn themselves out? They just got out all of the same energy, but like, you know, it's kind of like somebody who started sprinting during a marathon. And it's like, whoo, no, I'm really tired. And then they're the first ones to leave the marathon, because it's like, to me, it's like, well, you didn't really pace yourself. You just got so excited. And there's no problem with that. I'm not even saying that they're most extroverted of the extroverts either. But I'm just saying that like there's different types of like extroversion, like, you know, and then with SE DOMs, like the ESFPs and the ESTPs, they don't even they don't have to be speaking, like you said. Like their extroversion is like they're just doing all of these different things. They're just going to the bars. They're just running around and, you know, whatever it might be. And that's why ESTPs, like, they can, in my opinion, a lot of times they can seem so laid back and like chill, but and they might not be saying much, but they're doing a lot. Whereas like, yeah, for FE, it's like, okay, ours is like, okay, we're doing things for people, and we want to intimately connect. So we still have SE as a tertiary function. So it's like, yeah, no, I love the roller coasters and all of that. But it's like when we're in line, I want to talk about your philosophies on life. I want to talk about, like I want us to like really deeply connect. And if we're just going on roller coasters and going to drink and there's loud music and all that, I can't hang for too long. So just wanted to throw that on what you and Jessica said.
Well, I definitely relate to the idea of when I'm alone, I'm not really alone. As a more withdrawn person, I am often just kind of right here sitting at my computer, but I'm connected to people through things like Discord, Facebook, Reddit, like taking in ideas from YouTube and all of this stuff. And I'm just kind of like churning through it for myself and trying to understand how this is all coming together. So like Kinsey was saying, like actually going and then like separating from turning off like the computer and actually just sitting and with a piece of paper, and like that's more of like time alone. And how often I get that, I probably have like a few moments throughout the day where I'm like, oh, I need to like stop and like process through this. But perhaps I don't take that to the completion that I should. So it's hard to answer like how often do I need it? Because I probably need it every few minutes. Really, it's like I'm just like taking in so much, and I need to sort of really look back at where I am in all of this, because I'm just like taking in so many things from so many different directions, and all the time I'm like ignoring myself in all of that. So I'm just trying to like stop and like understand what other people are doing. So that's like where I'm in it. Like I am understanding and aligning and all those perspectives and all that stuff that you were saying. but where do I actually stand? Where do I come down on these things? What do I love and hate, to go back to our conversation earlier? It's like actually making that stance and choosing the thing that I'm going to continue to build off of. That's what I should be doing in my alone time that I maybe am not doing as much as I should be. So that's what I think about for alone time.
So answering the how often is an interesting one, because I didn't know until recently. I went camping with some friends and was like I went camping with some friends who are extroverted and was like with them like all week. And I also went camping with a friend who's very introverted, and we didn't go anywhere or do anything. And so I got a very clear sense of like what affects my need for alone time or extroverted time. Usually I need alone time at least like once a week, and that tends to be like a fairly extended thing. Like it might be an hour spent in like contemplation and meditation, or like an hour going for a walk or something. And then usually the same holds true for extroversion. I can like be completely isolated for about a week before I start needing to go out and interact. But I've noticed that the need for either one will go up or down depending on the quality of interaction, or like the amount to which we're sort of sharing openness and celebration and connection. Which has also been interesting, because there's been a lot of times where I've gone out and like connected very deeply with people, but still felt emotionally drained by the experience because it was mostly a one-way connection. And then with like alone time, my relationship with it has changed a lot. So ever since I started like meditation as a regular practice. So like for the greatest health for myself, not the limits of how long I can go, but like for my healthiest state, it's usually maybe 5 to 15 minutes of a kind of like letting the mind run down and allowing like internal silence to gradually replace it, or at least turning the attention back to internal silence whenever there's distraction. And then about 5 to 15 minutes at the end of the day of like going back over the day, observing when I was sort of knocked out of a centered state or emotionally triggered, and like trying to understand and accept why that happened, and then like balance the emotion with its opposite. When I do that regularly for about 5 to 15 minutes each every day, that is like the most healthy state that I'm in. And then finally, I would say one of the huge ways that my relationship with alone time has changed has been with regard to this, like, is it worth it? Like, is it productive? And is it selfish? And that changed because, like, I agree that you're always healthier when you do that. I've also come to believe that like humanity essentially shares a collective consciousness. And so that when you are sitting there by yourself, altering your own consciousness, doing internal growth work, or internal shadow work, or however you want to describe it, you are contributing to the entirety of human consciousness. And one of the central things I've come to believe is that transformation, both on an individual level and a collective level, happens internally before it happens externally. Sometimes there's external things that like force you into an internal change, but there always has to be this like shift that happens in your perspective or your way of seeing reality. And so to me, I see that as like, not only what I believe is that when you're alone doing that work, you are not only making sure you're healthy so that you can go change the world through action, but that you are actually affecting the like subtle aspects of reality or spiritual aspects of reality by changing your contribution to the collective consciousness, which then eventually results in like humanity as a whole changing.
Okay, so for me, alone time, I need that every day. And Denzel knows this, but I live in a really chaotic household. It's incredibly loud. I mean, I'm Chinese, so I think that it kind of speaks for itself, but it's essential to me because the people I live with, they really drain me. So my alone time is it looks pretty simple. I mean, to me, it's just having like an hour or half an hour a day before I sleep, just to do like mindless entertainment. Like I'll just be scrolling on Twitter or watching a YouTube video or just reading or just whatever. To kind of reconnect with myself, because I know that the next morning it's just going to be another day of getting drained and having people, you know, call on me and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, that's all great answers. For me, I think it's almost like kind of like what Rob was saying. I live with 2 introverts, my wife and my roommate, who are all like the same age. And then my roommate's daughter, she's an ESFJ, she's 7. So, you know, I'm like the man of the house. So it's like a lot's already like pulled on me in a way. But then they're not draining people. So I think that's kind of like why for me, it's like, oh, I can go a little bit longer. Whereas like, you know, like what Emerson was saying, it's like, if I'm around certain types of people, then it's like, okay, I really need to, you know, because they're like too much is being demanded from me. But on a consistent basis, I do need that time. Like I will escape to the bathroom at least like I think Jamila, actually my wife, like she probably thinks that I have a bladder problem because like every at least like 2 hours or so, then it's like, all right, I got to go to the bathroom. And while I'm in the bathroom, you know, like I'm not going to be, you know, explicit over here. I'll just show you guys like what I do. I literally just like probably just stand there and I'm just kind of like, and I'm just there. I just have to do that. And I feel like, you know, the bathroom door is closed. I can still hear the TV out in the living room. I can hear, you know, all the commotion and stuff like that, but I'm like separated from it and I'm able to like gather my thoughts. Sometimes even like, you know, I love the nighttime because that's the time where I'm always the last one to go to sleep. And so that's the time, like between 12 and 3 a.m. where it's like I'm reading and I'm even getting back to text messages because that's the time where it's like I can actually focus on the messages that I've received and give like quality responses and like actually process it without thinking I'm gonna get like interrupted or I'm being rude by being on my phone while I'm around them. Or a lot of times, like, you know, I'm driving and I'm not about to like text and drive kind of thing. So it's like, those are the times like I really get to be me. But then, and I count that as my alone time, but it's also funny, like with what Kinsey said, that it's not technically alone time then, because I'm still connected. And it goes back to what Jessica said too. Like, I definitely resonated with that. Like, when I'm like my alone time, I still like the idea of being connected with someone. And texting them. So because there's like different levels. It's like there's a difference in like you being right here and then me. It's like, oh, I can text back at my own leisure and stuff like that. And I'm just not obligated anymore to anyone. So this is now by choice. But yeah, I definitely need that time where I can just like kind of lay down and just be able to just be by myself. A lot of times, like I'll leave the apartment at times, like if the bathroom, I can't just like stick in there, especially because the 7-year-old, I don't know how, maybe it's a FE thing, like being the only 2 FE users in the house, but every single time I need to go use the bathroom, somehow, Denzel, I have to pee. And I'm like, how do you always need to use the bathroom when I need to? It's like, wow. But yeah, sometimes though, like I'll leave the apartment and I'll just like go sit in my car, because I realized too that when I don't have enough alone time, and this is something that happened recently, my simulations or like all of my NI thoughts, I start to like lose touch with reality, or like they'll start invading me. Like, so like we as soon as I sit down for a moment and I'm trying to pay attention, like watch a movie with the family or something, then there's been times where like I almost like caught myself falling because there's so much going on in my head that I didn't allow myself to have alone time to process. And so now it's like, all right, well, you've taken in so much information, even though you're not sleeping, you're not going to watch this movie. We're going to blast all of it towards you right now. And I found that phenomenon to be like very fascinating, like to the point where like even Jabila's like, yo, are you okay? Like, you need to actually schedule time then to like be alone and just kind of like be in your NI in a way. So yeah, that's been a big thing for me, at least like when it comes to alone time and like how much like I need it. So yeah. And then lastly, for the last 2 questions, so I'm making this like an open thing. So for number 5, throughout this video, or just even in general, have any of y'all noticed like any differences, whether in perspective or anything at all, between like the males and the females, like male and female, like ENFJs? Because we are a very uncommon type, not according to statistics or whatever. I think we are the second most uncommon type, and especially when it comes to like male versus female differences, like male ENFJs are way more uncommon, but even then it's like FE is a function that's focused on the social norms and like how do we interact and stuff like that. So I'm wondering, like, us being now together, what would you say are some things that maybe you've noticed, like between the way that some of us have like said things or what we've said, or just ENFJs that you've seen online or in real life that is like, oh, I've noticed that the male ENFJs are more like this, but the female ENFJs are more like that? Or it's like, actually, I don't really see too much of a difference between all of us after all. And we don't have to go in order. So
I see individual differences with each one of us. I don't think it's necessarily so specific with male and female. I especially saw that earlier with Cam and with Vicky when they were talking about schedules, because she needs her schedule, and for him that's constricting, and I kind of fall somewhere in between. Like, if someone wants to be spontaneous and they're like, hey, you want to go out to dinner? If I don't already have another obligation, I'm fine with that. Because I'm not my sister who's an IJ would be like, absolutely not. I need 3 days heads up. That's not going to work for me. But for me, it's like, I can play with spontaneity. I prefer order, but it's more relative to me. It's kind of falls there in the middle. But she's female, he's male, I'm a female, so I land somewhere in between, and I see very interesting individualized differences between all of us. One thing that I will say is I don't think I know anyone here enough to make that judgment call at all, because I would need to talk to each one for at least the 2 hours individually to be able to see that overarching pattern and to get to know people more individually. But as a cursory overall, I think we all have our unique differences. I love how the Enneagram colors things differently too. Hearing from the 7 and then the 2 and then there's a couple 3s in here. Like, to me, it's so interesting how much that can play a role. But as far as to what specifically the male versus female coin plays, I think I would need more time with a pool of ENFJs to see that overarching pattern.
Yeah, so maybe we'll just go in order. So yeah, I also was thinking more that the Enneagram does much more than the gender does, I think, and it comes more to the individual than to the gender. But what I see is that maybe a slight pattern in the MBTI community typing people. I mean, typing more, not people maybe, but characters. My inner nerd comes out right now, and like, yeah, I'm watching anime, and when I like see people typing male versus female characters, then usually the characters that are typed as ENFJ and are female are much more extroverted than the male characters. Not only in anime, I think in movies too. It's just like, I think a general thing that people do. They probably are also mistyped like characters, but it's just something that I saw because I rarely relate to the female characters, and usually when I relate, they're typed as INFJ. So yeah, because I'm more like on the ambivert way. I mean, yeah.
One of the things I noticed is that females have a 1 in 4 chance of leaving early. So, as for the thing you just mentioned with characters the females being more extroverted versus the males, I guess in terms of the male versus female question, I didn't realize it was going to be this interview specifically, so I was kind of thinking culturally. So like culture norms, it's
definitely include that. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
saying like this or overall, but yeah.
I would say it's like female tends to be like stereotyped as F types more generally. So it's like the guys that are FE maybe are like more reserved in expressing that part of themselves in some way, because it's like, oh, society kind of says like you're not supposed to act like that, maybe, so that could play into that as a thing. So that's just something I'll throw out. I don't really have much to say, to be honest, about the people right here in terms of like gender differences. I wasn't really picking up on anything in particular, so yeah. But that 1 in 4 chance that one of them might have to leave early. So
I will say though that
more guys dropped out.
The third time. Exactly. Yeah. Like it's really crazy how, like, when I did the sausage party video, guys dropped out. And then doing this video, like 2 or 3 guys also dropped out. And I was just like, I thought that Cam was even about to drop out too. Like I was at the grocery store just like 2-3 hours before we hopped on, and then Cam was like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna be there. I was like, oh, okay. Because so it was about to like 4 guys that were like, just dropped out. And I was like, man, like, do we have commitment issues? Like I planned this like way in advance for that reason. But yeah, Vicky, although she said that she had a headache, and I know that you weren't trying to say anything about her in general, but yeah.
No, I mean, I was trying to say anything. I was just making a joke.
Yeah, I don't think I noticed too many differences. I think the only person I didn't really hear specifically on the topic of scheduling, as far as the females are concerned, was Jessica. Like your sort of, inclination to kind of schedule your life out, stick to a calendar, have like a to-do list, or either internally or externally. I don't know. Like, what would you say to that?
So about scheduling, but in what sense?
Like, how do you run your life? Like, how do you make sure that your life stays on track? Do you have a process by which you I guess we all have a process. Some of us are just a lot more specific than others. But like, do you have a Google Calendar and everything goes in there? And if it's not in the calendar, like it's not going to get done or it's not a priority, or like, are you kind of a more go with the flow type?
Okay. So yeah, for my like, I don't know, like work or studies or stuff, then I have a schedule. But yeah, I also have like a diary where I like put like exams and stuff like that I need to like, you know, like deadlines and stuff that I need to yeah, think about. But then when I have like the day-to-day like stuff going on, then I just do like notes, like just bullet points, and then I'm just checking them. I'm not like too big of like planning very detailed in a detailed way.
Are you in Poland right now?
Yeah.
What time is it over there?
3:35.
In the morning?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's pretend that it's 9:35 p.m. like it is here in Boston. It's Boston time right now, 9:35. Let's say your friend hit you up right now at 9:30 and was like, "Yo, we're going out. You coming with? Are you going or not?"
At 9:30, I think I would be already maybe in my PJs, so probably not.
Okay, well then, I guess one thing that I've noticed, and this is a generalization, not knowing you guys too well, the three of you, Kinsey, Jessica, and Vicky, seem like you're much more inclined to keep to a schedule, much more inclined to be less spontaneous. Tina, this is just going off of your personality and the way that you carry yourself. You feel like a bro. Like, I feel like I could hit you up like right now, and I'm like, "Yo, Tina, we going to McHenry's. You coming with? We gonna grab a drink." And I have a feeling you'd be like, "Yeah." Is that fair?
I wouldn't.
You
I
wouldn't?
told you last minute. That's the thing with me. Don't let me know.
Well, that's wild.
The day before, but not.
Well, that's wild. Well, I mean, that's even higher chances. Now, I don't know about the guys, but I know DZ would be cool with it just because I've hung out with him enough. I don't know about Robin Emrys, but I mean, what would you guys think? What would you guys, if it's 9:35 right now, if I was 5 minutes away from your house and I'm like, "Yo, let's hit up a bar."
It depends on the person in the event, but yeah, if it's somebody that I really love hanging out with and I like the event, I'm like, yeah, let's go. And I've noticed that too. I don't know if I could put it into words. I don't know if it's like a Enneagram thing more than a like male-female thing, but it sounded like all the women in the call were much more structured in their schedule in general than the men in the call, or much more likely to impose a structure into the schedule and not like drop that structure like you're describing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's so, like, my suspicion on this relates to a like a societal expectation. I'm speaking a little bit in ignorance here, so correct me if you think I'm totally off base, but I think our society exerts a greater force on women to like conform to social norms. Like there's less acceptance of being like an outlier or a wild card, because that's seen as like dangerous or unacceptable or even just mean, like if you're not pleasant and happy all the time, like and so I think there's more pressure on that with like the ENFJs as well, because it's like, I think for guys, if you see a guy being pleasant, that doesn't usually turn into an expectation that like that guy's baseline. But I think that's usually the case in the professional world, at least for women. I could be wrong. And then the other thing I think is like, I think that expectation forces a lot of women to sort of get their shit together faster than guys. And also there's a variable maturity rate where so I think that's one of the things where it's like, I've noticed that the guys will be much more comfortable just being like, it's whatever. And I think that's because society like gives men more room to do that without judging them for it.
I 100% agree, Emrys. I think that, yeah, like even smaller things where it's like, who are you going to expect to be like the stay-at-home mom? Like if y'all have children, you know, Kinsey, she's about to have a child. It's like, okay, even though she's the extrovert and her husband's the introvert, I'm wondering like who would be more likely to be like, oh, well, I have to stay at home and take care of the child, you know, kind of thing. I have this set structure, whereas like the man, you know, like I think that we have the responsibility a lot of times, like we carry a lot more responsibility I think.
Well, at least who's expected to do it by
Exactly.
like the culture.
Expectation maybe is the better word that I'm looking for. We have more expectation, but yeah, I do think that like we are more of like the types that's like, yeah, Cameron, for sure. Like if literally, like, which I heard that you were supposed to be in Atlanta this weekend. We'll talk about that after the call. But yeah, like if literally like Cameron was like, hey, I know that we just got off that 2.5 hour long video call, but I'm actually around. Like you trying to like, I'd be like, yeah, because I literally will think to myself like, oh, I can sleep later. Like I can, yeah. But at the same time, like Emma said, like it depends. Like who is it going to be?
So
yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say I don't want to ask anyone to like speak for their biological gender, but like, do you feel like this is anywhere close to your experience? You feel like there's more nuance than we're seeing here? Like those of you who actually have this gender and have experienced it?
I think there's a heck of a lot of nuance, and I'd also think that it depends on the culture that you're in. So, like for my religious culture, it's not that I have to be the stay-at-home mom. I get to be a stay-at-home mom. Like that is such a gift to me that I have the ability to stay home and mold my children. Like to me, that seems like the most important job in the world is to mold the next generation, and to be able to be blessed with a husband that does have a work ethic and he can go out there. Like if I wanted to go and work, and I'm a person, I'm always going to have a side hustle. That's just kind of part of my personality and who I am. He would absolutely support it, but I felt pressured in the opposite way. And I touched on this a little bit earlier. Like, as a 3, I need to be the next Tony Robbins. I feel pressure to, like, if you don't want to be a career woman, then that's not looked up upon in today's society, I feel like. And to be able to get to the core of what is going to be fulfilling to me outside of my Christian circle, outside of the secular circle. Like I hear a lot of people say you're just a stay-at-home mom, and I watched my mom be a stay-at-home mom for 20 years, full-time homeschooling 4 children. That's a hard freaking job, and I love the woman to death for it. So for me, going into the next chapter, I am super stoked and excited about it, and I still look at the side hustles I'm going to have because that's just who I am. But I think that there is nuance there because in society right now, I feel like it's such a big conversation that women have the option, that those who choose not to be career women sometimes get a little bit of stigma in the other direction.
Yeah, I was gonna say too that I do also think that ENFJ women, from what I've noticed, they do tend to also be a little bit more strict, generally speaking. And I think it kind of goes back to this thing that we were talking about, like more of the pattern. Although I do agree with what Kinsey was saying as well. But I think that she might be like one of the outliers where it's like, I guess kind of like, yeah, with the men, like once again, like we might have like more expectations, like, okay, generally speaking, like bring home the bread and stuff like that, maybe depending on the culture. But with like women, there's so much responsibility on them that it's like, you know, how often do we like look on TV and then we see the goofy husband, you know, and the playful goofy husband, and then he has like a wife that's like shaking her head at him, kind of thing. Like she's the more matured and, you know, responsible one, kind of thing. And I find like that to be like really interesting. So I think that with ENFJ men, also with that, kind of like what Jessica was saying, is like, I think that people also expect ENFJ women to be so much more like, hey, you know, like, and just very like, I don't know, like there. Whereas like a lot of ENFJ women, like when I think of like from maybe shows like Gotham, if you look at Lee on there, or Morena Baccarin herself, she's an ENFJ in my opinion. Very composed. I'd say that she reminds me a lot of Jessica in my opinion. Like she's composed and she's not like super talkative, but you can tell like she reads the room like really well. And people, I guess like if they wouldn't pay enough attention, if they have like a very like oh, but ENFJs are supposed to look like this, they would type that person as an INFJ. You know, looking back also at like the show Demon Slayer, there was I forgot her name,
Hinetsuru?
but yes, her. Yeah, like she's most likely in ENFJ. And I don't know how many of y'all like watch like anime, but her demeanor is like calm water. You know, like it's very like, you know, Iroh even then, you know, like now like going like to the males, like Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like you look online, it's like you're seeing like INFP and like introvert, and it's like, no, that man's an extrovert. So I think that that's also like another thing. It's like we get lost in the spectrum a lot of times. But then it does seem like ENFJ men are more recognized as being like more reserved. And I think that I hadn't thought about it before, but I think that makes sense, Jessica, like what you're saying, that because we're feeler dominant, or was it Rob? One of you had said that, like because we're feeler dominant, and we're like not maybe as comfortable expressing in that way. So then we do have like more of like a reserved nature to us, that'll just kind of like make us look more of like a father figure in a way, because we're not about to just be blasting feelings, but instead we're going to be like that Iroh or Professor Xavier, who once again, they get looked at as INFJs a lot of times. Even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a lot of people are like, yeah, no, I think that he's INFJ. And it's like, what? Like, have you read his books? Have you, like, if you read, like, you know, Strength to Love, like his wife wrote about him at the beginning, and she talks about like how whenever he would be with his friends, then he would laugh at them, or like they would laugh at him because he was impatient. And he said, well, yeah, like, because y'all are always on this analysis paralysis. Like, when are we going to get into action? Like, he wasn't about like just sitting down and just constantly just talking. Like, he wanted to do something, which to me is like, that's very not INFJ. Like, that's the SE tertiary. Like, okay, we got to do something. But because like he had like a more thoughtful and reserved nature, then it's like it starts to make people like, I don't know. So I feel like when it comes to the norm and like the culture and everything, then yeah, like we expect like EFJ women especially to just be more of the host and more of like the external ones. And because they have those responsibilities, whereas like as men, we can usually just kind of chill and just watch things, and we don't have to exert as much control in order to control, because for whatever reason, like that's just how the patriarchy is set up. Then we have more room to seem more introverted and reserved in that way. So I think that women sometimes have to work harder for their respect, and ENFJ women in that way also have to do the same thing. They don't have as much freedom, and that's something that might even lead them into like having a more serious demeanor than the ENFJ men might, because it's like, no, we can just pick that up and get the same results that the ENFJ woman might have to work a little bit harder for, in my opinion.
Yeah, I never would have pegged Jessica, even though I've only known you for 2 hours, 40 minutes, and 24 seconds, or Vicky as the ENFJs. Like I never would have. Not that I'm good at it to begin with, but like it wouldn't have even crossed my mind.
Tina, have you gone yet? Have you noticed any difference between
something different? Well, okay, difference is everybody comes from a different walk of life, so I get why we're all so different. But again, like what Kinsey said, we have this shape or form to us, but different colors. I will say though, similarity, all of you guys are really beautiful. When you guys are talking, your answers just hit me in the chest. I'm like, why y'all so beautiful? That's all I have to say. We can move on to the next.
Nice. All right. And then the final question, thanks by the way, Tina, is what's a social norm you'd like to do away with or develop / tweak more? And the reason why I asked this question is because I think that as ENFJs, like we get the stereotype, especially as FE DOMs, it's like, oh, we're conformists, you know, whatever society says that, you know, like we follow the social norms and we're the, hey, don't do that type of people. And I think that to an extent we are. Like, you know, if you go down Tina's Twitter, you'll see her giving a whole bunch of, we should be wearing masks and we should be doing this. And no, if you go over to someone's house, don't use their toilet in this way kind of thing, which is all coming from like a considerate space. But at the same time, I think that we're also like people don't give our type like enough room to like understand that a lot of times we create the social norms that everybody else is following. So it's not that we're conforming, we're creating what everybody's supposed to be following. So there's a difference there. And if something doesn't make sense, like we still have the TI there, it's like, okay, hold on. And the NI is like, all right, how far is this going to go? Like, again, Martin Luther King Jr., he's like, okay, no, this doesn't make sense. We should not be this divided over skin color. This is stupid. It doesn't make sense. Let's change the social norm here. We don't have to have separate schools. We don't have to have separate, water fountains, stuff like that. And that's just like one example kind of thing. So I'm not even talking necessarily about racism, but like just any social norm, like in general, like what have y'all noticed maybe? Yeah.
I was going to ask if I can do this one real quick because then I have to go. So the three come to mind. One is in the education system, like there's a tendency to treat the education like an investment where there's an expectation that some people have knowledge and wisdom, they hand it to others, and that like produces a return on investment that produces like productivity for society. And to me, I think that the shift that would be far healthier would be for us to basically make education about teaching younger generations to analyze the way the world currently is, decide whether they think that's the wisest and kindest way to proceed, and then empower them to create changes in their environment around them, so that rather than teaching them to sustain whatever the status quo is and sort of the dehumanizing process of like, we want something out of you and we're going to evaluate you like you're a product, teaching them that they have like this sacred ability and duty to create change to the world around them as they see fit. The second one is related to that, where it's like, at this point, like we've had the technology since about the 70s to solve just about every scarcity issue that we have on the planet. And as far as I can tell, us continuing to do a few things, like turn basic necessities of life into commodities, and then like, being like, everyone has a right to life, but we're also going to like make food, shelter, and health like things that are primarily focused on creating profit, rather than while there are people like starving and in poverty, and then relying on like the global poor as like essentially modern slave labor to sustain our current structure. Like those are things that as a culture, I don't think we've quite reached the point where it's like, oh, like it doesn't really mean much if you say everyone has a right to life if you also put them in danger of losing basic necessities out in the name of profit. And then the third one, which is grounded in the idea that like there's plenty of food and space to live and technological innovation to provide for everyone on the planet, but there's a sort of false creation of scarcity to fuel a greater profits. And then the third one is more sociological, where I think it's marriage, where we have a tendency to place great expectations on change in a relationship in marriage. I don't want to speak universally for everyone, but that's a very common like perspective where it's like marriage changes you drastically. And so people often go into marriage not realizing they now have different expectations on the other person. And sometimes that's because there's a perception that like marriage means you lose autonomy or you completely meld together. And so then it's like, oh, now I'm expecting you to behave a certain way that wouldn't have been there if we hadn't changed anything about our relationship. So I think there's there's also a sort of cultural inertia of marriage as an inherently conflict-filled space. Like a vast majority of comedy and drama contains like marriage conflict as at least one of the features of it, and that's a very common way of portraying marriage. So I think that as people go into marriage, there's the influence of this sense of like conflict is a part of the game. So with that sense, I'd like to see people basically, if you want to get married, like have nothing needing to change about your relationship between the time before you're married and after you're married so that you're basically the same people. And maybe you've changed, like, you've added some kind of sacred commitment or changed like legal status, or even like, changed like the nature of your long-term plans. But I think there needs to be like a continuity between the before and after, so there's not this big expectation. And then I think there needs to be a sort of seeing mated relationships as like free giving one to the other rather than a adversarial expectation. And with that, I'm gonna bounce because I got to get going.
Thanks.
You guys are fantastic. Wonderful.
Very well said.
Love you, bro.
Thank you. Denzel, love you too, man.
Yeah, I would agree with the reforming the education system and stuff, because that's like, I'm also a teacher like Emrys, so I try to pop in some like food for thought to the children, like when I have the occasion. So I try to like I don't know, look for text or something that they can read, and for example about fake news or something like that, like some topics that make them think about different stuff than that they are not taught at school, even though they're just learning a language. So yeah, I would totally agree with that. And then when I was thinking about that question, I had a slight problem because it heavily depends, the social norms, they heavily depend on the culture. And since I moved a bit the countries, I lived in Germany and Poland and Japan. And in Japan especially, the social norms are very different than in our Western cultures. So yeah, there I would say I had the biggest problem with taboo topics, like talking about, I don't know, your religious views or politics or where you work or something like that, like just digging deeper to getting to know the person. I found it quite difficult because it's considered a taboo topics usually. So that is something that I would like wish maybe to change, but like I'm not Japanese, so maybe I don't want to impose like something on them. But yeah, then overall, we had a nice conversation on one of my sociology classes last week, and it was about emotional labor. I worked in a hotel for almost a year in Japan, and it is so tiring when you need to be so nice to people, to customers that are so rude to you. And it's just, I wouldn't be rude to them even if they would be rude to me, because I'm still ENFJ, but I like just that it is expected of people who work in service that they need to be nice even to people that you can be very rude to people that work in service, and you just can expect from them to be nice whatever you do, like it doesn't matter. And that's just like something that I wish that people would like change their views on. I think it's a problem in every country, probably.
When you were talking earlier, Denzel, about creating social norms and that kind of being our job, that honestly, that's not really the way I see it. I see myself as more just like identifying and being aware, and then seeing when those are potentially causing problems. Like where is like something in our culture potentially affecting people in negative ways, and like how do we highlight those negative things happening and let people know that like this is something that we need to address. So like, for instance, Jessica was just talking about Japan and like some taboo topics, like maybe that works for them, but maybe it's also causing like shame and problems for people. So maybe that's like something that needs addressed, and there needs to be some kind of outlet for that fits with the culture. So that's kind of what I think about with social norms. In terms of stuff that I would be interested in like pushing forward though, and things that I see sort of pain points as I'm kind of bringing up here, is in the workplace. And Simon Sinek is some NFJ type. I'm like 100% sure, because he's basically an NFJ bot on Twitter. Like it's ridiculous. Like everything he tweets out is just like some sort of like vision for the future of like, we need to move this way. We need to move this way. Like it's ridiculous. But he does a lot of like studying on I don't know if he actually does studying. He might just be doing like envisioning for what the future of a workplace could look like that would be happier for people, because like Emrys was talking about earlier, we have a lot of resources and things, and there's a lot of strain that just comes from the complexity of our modern times, and all this technology is great and it puts a lot of things at our fingertips, but a lot of things at our fingertips keeps our fingers very busy and our minds busy too, right? So the ways in which we can stop being just like robots who have to like manage all of these things all the time, and like how do we get human elements back into the workplace? Because you could think about it in terms of just like the simple dichotomy of T versus F. There's a lot of T in work a lot of the time, and people are meant to just like sit at their desk and like T things out all day long and just like plug away, get their job done, right? But we need that human element a little bit back, and remind people like, what are we working towards and why do we care about this thing? And we need that to be incorporated into the things that we do every day, right? So those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in. And I guess I'm not really proposing anything in particular here, but that's the I guess in general, shifting towards some kind of community atmosphere where people don't feel like I need to get back to my desk and do more work, because that's something that I kind of see at my workplace, where like you have some kind of community day and everybody just feels like super strange doing that because they're not doing the thing that they normally do every day. So you need to have some kind of like regular ability for people to get out of their desks and communicate with people and build a community, not just a place where you come, log in, do your work, and then you leave and you go live your life, because your work day is your life, right? Like a lot of that's a large majority of your day. So that's kind of the kind of thing that I want to see. I want to see people living their lives and like getting work done. That's a great thing, but that's yeah.
So people have a little bit more balance, Rob. Not just because, I mean, you're right. The work takes up such a large majority of our life, but a lot of us, and I've been very guilty of this, become workaholics and we don't really have any balance. Am I understanding what you were saying correctly?
I think so. Yeah. Well, so it's also like while you're there, like actually like enjoying and valuing the things that you're doing. You're not just like doing them because somebody told you to, and you want the money at the end. It's like you like want to see that what you're doing is serving some larger purpose, right? So there's ways that you can really lose sight of that with, like I like to think of it as like the ST split versus the NF split. Like what do we care about? Like where's this going? And like taking the time, like Simon Sinek is just like seeing this like every day when he wakes up, like this, and he sees that a lot of people are really missing this from their life because they're just like going and getting the thing done. In reality, that's like what work wants. They want this ST thing, but like what does it mean to us to actually get that done? So
yeah, you're clock in, clock out, and get your paycheck, as opposed to being excited about a larger vision and about being part of a team.
Yeah, what are you contributing to? Because you can get lost in the details, right? So
yeah, that's totally fair. And I kind of agree too with some of the stuff that Jessica has mentioned. I remember one of the big shocks to me was when I was first getting in the work field. I started when I was 17 volunteering full-time, because by the time I was 18, I wanted something on my resume. So I was at the Humane Society and I was in the vet clinic, and I was chit-chatting with this other volunteer that was there, and we were talking about politics. And like we came from totally different points of view, but it wasn't cantankerous, it wasn't contentious at all. We were just exchanging ideas and we were having fun, like actually discussing what we believed. And it was a delightful time. Both him and I were having a great time, and it wasn't getting heated or anything. And the veterinarian came up to me and she said, "You can't talk about religion or politics." Okay, why? Because you don't do that in a workspace. I'm like, but those are literally like some of the most important things in our lives. Like, this isn't contentious. that seems dumb to me. That seems stupid. I'm sorry. Well, and I didn't say that. I obviously said it in a much more FE way. This is my years later TI coming back, like what I really felt that I didn't say. But what I did say was, why? We're having a delightful conversation. But that's not what you were supposed to do. So I could totally see that in like a Japanese culture. My ex-boss was from Japan. He was Japanese too, and I could definitely see some of that influence as well. But like, if we're having really good conversation and people aren't getting offended, and these are important things in life, what's better to talk about? This is deep, meaningful information. Like, this should be encouraged. The free flow of ideas and beliefs should be encouraged. It's the suppression of that and the questioning. Like we should be encouraged to question. And I believe that in society, and I believe that in religion. Like, the moment that someone says, you can't talk about that, that's uncomfortable. Well, maybe that's exactly why we should be talking about that. And I wish that that was more acceptable. I absolutely do. And the one other thing that I'll say on societal norms is, I said this in the slumber party as well, and it might just be something really specific to my generation too, but I often see a lot of finger pointing. It's not my fault. It's because of this, or it's because of that, or it's because it's something outside myself. And to tie in a little bit with what Emerson was talking about like the collective consciousness earlier, when you stop trying to fix the world and you first look to fix yourself, I think that has a really big impact. I think personal responsibility, there's not enough talking about it in our culture. I think that's really where the magic happens, because DZ, you know this too. I mean, the Bible talks about, taking the log out of your own eye before the splinter out of somebody else's. Like, it's easy. It's easy to point the finger and say, it's not my fault. It's because I grew up disabled. I'm a woman. I have this, that, and the other going for me. And the reality is, you are dealt a hand in life, but it is up to you to how you play it. And if we spent more time as a society talking about, you have so much power. And the moment you start pointing fingers, you lose that. But if we just knew how much power we individually had, everyone could make so much more of a difference in the world. And I honestly believe that is the biggest root to a lot of problems, is people taking lack of personal responsibility. I think that would go a really, really long way.
I can't tell who you're pointing at, Tina.
I don't know which way the camera goes.
I'll say something that I'm thinking through as I'm saying it, so it might be stupid. I think if we could figure out a way to practically establish like that culture of empathy that's kind of gotten thrown around a couple times, I think that would make the world a better place, right? And I think practically, to make that happen, it's very hard. It's very hard to have and operate with a culture of empathy if, it's only sustainable if it's reciprocal. Like, you can only be empathetic to the point where other people are being empathetic back. Meaning, like, let's say you and your sister are at the dinner table and there's 3 slices of pizza, right? You could feel empathetic towards her being hungry, and so you give her your 3 slices of pizza. But if she doesn't give you 3 slices of pizza back, then you're hungry. If you don't give her 3 slices of pizza, then she's hungry. Like, the only way it's sustainable, because of human nature, at least in my opinion, is if people are conscious of each other. And I think the only way for that to happen is if people are given the autonomy to disagree. I guess the root of what I'm trying to get at is that I think there's this really like negative thing that's happening that comes from a positive place, that we all need to be on the same page about everything in order for any good to happen. And I think what that does is paints over a lot of people's experiences and opinions and knowledge with a really broad stroke that ends up leaving things just messy. But if you give people the the ability to disagree with you and maintain your opinion at the same time, and sort of just give people this just this space to be totally different than you are. Uh, I think you'll be happier. They'll feel honored, and everybody can move forward at their own pace. Like Jess, you were talking about. I'm just calling you Jess, like we're old friends. Sorry, that was disrespectful. Is that cool? Like you were talking about, like what was going on in Japan and like the culture that's over there, and like there probably are some norms over in Japan that I would feel like, that's weird. But then also you see how well they, I don't know, like handled COVID, for instance, right? Because they're so homogenous, because they have more of a honor culture, they were willing to fall in line, right? So like obviously there's something that's gotten them here after the past, I don't know, thousands of years that they've been in existence, right? And so I can look at Japan, not knowing anything about Japan, and being like, there's some things that are weird, there's some things that are really cool. There's probably a lot that I don't know, and that's cool. And like we just move forward, right? I think right now it's very hard to have a dissenting opinion without somebody chopping your throat off. Like it's just hard to say anything that is that comes across as like I don't know, hateful or I don't know, just even against the grain, right? Without people coming at you as if you're a hater. And I think for my personality type, which maybe you guys would relate, not only am I extremely empathetic in that I try to see people's points of view, but I'm also an instigator. Like, not only do I want to know your point of view, I want you to convince me that your point of view is right. So like, I'm going to dig into it, not to be antagonistic, but I want, maybe you're right and I'm wrong, but I'm not just going to believe what you say until you convince me that you're right. And so like having that personality in me, I would love to see a world where it's okay to dig into the pain points of somebody's opinion for the simple fact to see if what they're saying holds water. So that if it is true, you can adopt it and move forward. But when you start cutting people off, it makes it hard to get anything done, anything real, anything real. So like establishing a culture of empathy, and that's really easy to say. Like that's not very practical at all. But just giving people space to disagree.
Cam, that is beautiful. And I think of it in terms of, I don't want to know what you believe. I want to know why you believe what you believe. Because that's still what I'm trying to figure out too. And I think that's one of the great things about life, is that's what we're always going to be doing. But like, it's the difference between being a voice and being an echo. Like, I want to know why. Because I am okay if we disagree, but if I'm wrong, I don't want to live in deceit. I would rather seek truth. And I would love to be in a culture where having those kind of discussions is encouraged. I thought that was great.
But Kinsey, the thing that I feel, and this is a negative, the thing that I honestly believe, and I'm learning this the older I get, is that most people, in my experience, aren't willing to do the work. They're not willing to work through an alternative opinion to see if it's worth it. Because it takes a lot of effort, because not only are you working through what somebody else has experienced, you have to degrade what you've experienced to the point where you're breaking your house down to the bricks to see if it was ever worth building into a house to begin with. And that's terrifying. That's terrifying to break down your own foundations to see if somebody else, what they built was worth it. And I don't know, it takes a lot of time to pull that out of someone, especially somebody who's not so inclined to be as quote unquote empathetic.
No, I agree, which is why when there are free-flowing conversations that happen with people from different points of view, what I think is so toxic is when someone else comes in and says, hey, that makes me uncomfortable, shut it down. It's like, those are people doing the work. That's awesome. I would love to talk to more people that disagree with me. And I think you're absolutely right. There's not a lot of people that are willing to do that. And when people are, I think it's really threatening to other people as well, because they know that's good and it's really difficult.
Like, I think of how many people in Rob's life have come at him because of the silent Q. And I just think that there are, you just have to see things from other people's perspective.
It's a good point. It's a good point.
We hate what we don't understand.
I'm telling you, man.
A social norm that I want to get rid of is formality. I find that when we have to be formal, we're putting up a wall, something that's not really who we are. Like, for example, a big one is like going to a job and you have to, put your best face forward. I feel like that's not our authentic self. We have to put on this front. And I know people are going to say like, oh yeah, that's tradition. You just always have to, have those mannerisms and be formal. But it's like, how would you get to really know who I am, my true work ethics, my true personality at work, if this is how I'm supposed to show my face to you? And yeah, just even this, not even like an interview, just like, I don't know, let's say going on a date or something. Like, people want to make good first impressions, and because of that, they're more formal. They wear like a suit and a tie, they wear a dress, and I'm like, yo, if you want to wear sweatpants, wear it. How does that determine my character? Who gives a shit? Like, I'm not gonna judge somebody on what they wear. So it's stuff like that that makes me think like, yo, everybody's so formal. Like, even the way I think of you guys, like, I'm just like, yo, bro, sis, and stuff. So it's like, yeah, that you get more fun out of life when you're just informal. Just drop the veil, whatever,
Yeah, for sure. I think that actually wraps in with what Kinsey and Cam were saying very well. And then that was the main thing that I was thinking too. More room for empathy and being able to discuss like taboo things. Like, just like I said at the beginning, intimacy is a very big thing for me. And so that once again ties in with the formality thing. Like, if I'm talking to Jessica, who thankfully, like, she knows me pretty well, like, I think that I'm so grateful that I'm at a point now where it's like I can say certain things and I don't have to worry about what Jessica's going to think because she knows me already as like a person, kind of thing. With Tina, same thing. Like, I make so many jokes that I would not make in a public space with Tina. And like, and Tina does the same thing back. And it's like, I would love to see that spread a little bit more. I understand why, like, people have to warm up to each other, kind of thing. But I would love to see more of, like, if we had more empathy throughout life, throughout the way that we interact with each other, maybe we wouldn't fear as much. And that's where pretty much it comes down back to like not shaming people so quickly, like cancel culture and stuff like that. Like, if you shame people before you even get to the roots of whatever they're thinking, because like you said, Cam, like, that takes work. So you're shaming them. It's like, hey, yo, why are you gay? Like, stop that. Like, that's not going to stop them from being gay. Like, what? And I'm not even saying that that's something that we should stop even then, but it's like, if somebody's racist, it's like, you can't just be like, that's bad, stop, we don't do that over here. It's like, whoa, all right, hold on, bro, let me talk to you. Like, what have you experienced with Black people? What have you experienced with Indians? Like why do you have these preconceived notions? And we have to be rational and not let our emotions get the best of us, because once again, just like we were saying with the love and hate thing, I really believe that everybody is doing things that just make sense to them. They're just operating from like, hey, this is just what makes sense to me. And they write their math equation. And if you're lazy to check through their math and see how they got there, then you probably should not cast as much judgment and shame onto them, because you don't know how they were. And a lot of times people see other people get shamed, they'll have those same thoughts, and it's kind of like roaches that just run underneath the refrigerator. You didn't kill the roaches, you just made them scurry away. But in order to really fix the problem, it's going to take work. You're going to have to get in there, you're going to have to try to understand where they're coming from, all of that. And you have to create that space where they can share it, So I think that if we had more empathy like that, and we had more patience to be able to really speak about these taboo topics, or like, someone's like, oh yeah, I made a joke about pedophilia. Like, oh, well, hold on. Like, I'm not quote unquote judging you, but Well, let's talk about that. Like, I feel like that's probably not something we should like joke about, or like this person's like trauma. It's like, well, I mean, it was just a joke, but like, it's like, yeah, I mean, I get that, but let's see it this way. You know, like really go in there. It's like, hey, that was messed up. Or like, you know what I mean? I feel like when we really assume the best intent of people, then that's when they're more liable to be like, yeah, you know what? Actually, I see where you're coming from. That was kind of immature and messed up of me. I need to take that back. Like, I didn't mean to make that joke about 9/11 or whatever it might be, kind of thing. It's like, or even if I did mean it, people have just always told me I shouldn't do it, but I never really understood why. But you really took the time to understand where I was coming from and then rearranged my math in that way without making me feel like a bad person. And I think that if we applied that to like way more things, then that would just be dope. And just like what Kinsey said, like, you know, just being able to talk about things. Like, I just want to, I hate boundaries. I'll just come out and say that. I really hate when it's like, we can't talk about something. Like, I want to understand you. I want to understand why you think this, where your views are, even if we disagree. It's like kind of like what Cameron was saying. It's like, I want to know why you believe that, so that even if somebody was to like attack your opinion, like, hold on, I know, like, I don't agree with Cameron over here, but I can argue Cameron's perspective so well that it's going to make sense because I see how it makes sense to him. And if it doesn't make sense, well, hopefully I did a good enough job in explaining why it doesn't make sense to me. And if Cameron's a sensible enough person, he'll probably also reject it and accept the truth. And then, you know, we just move on in life that way. So I want people to also like not be as afraid of like losing face. When we get into like debates and like whatever, it's like, I am not afraid to be like, oh, yo, you were right. Sorry, I was wrong. Thanks for enlightening me. We get on Twitter. I see people like, somebody says like one wrong thing, 500 people like hop on like, yo, look at this guy. It's like, bro, I hate that. I hate that. Like, I love when somebody can just like, when we have like a gentleness and a patience to like help each other to better understand. It's like, yo, I'm sorry. I came into this conversation thinking one way, but now I really see where y'all are coming from. And I wouldn't have changed my mind if y'all just like started like throwing tomatoes at me. But because y'all took the time to understand like where I was coming from in this way, and y'all were patient, and that took work. Like, I really appreciate it. In fact, I know a whole bunch of other people who think just like me, but they wouldn't say it publicly like I did. I'm gonna go back and explain to them what y'all just taught me. So yeah. Anyway, thank y'all infinitely for coming out today. Especially, you know, once again, even like, especially you, Jessica, like it's 4 a.m. over there. Like, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say that, yeah, I appreciate all of y'all. And I don't know what to say. I'm at a loss of words. There it is. But,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming out, y'all. I really appreciate it. And I hope that, you know, everybody who's been watching, y'all enjoy this. Make sure to share with friends. Done.
Cam, you're gonna swing by and we're gonna hit the bar now?
Let's do it, dog. Let's do it. Jess will be there in about 13 hours.
Yeah, just take the next plane.
Hey, I just wanted to briefly thank you for taking the time to watch this video, whether it was on regular speed or 2x speed, whatever it was. Just thank you for consuming the content. And around me, you should be able to see a few little buttons and logos for other recommended videos, because, you know, I make good content, new ones, but then I also have some really good old content too that you should probably check out. But make sure that if you really like this video, feel free to subscribe, to share. It really helps this humble channel to expand and reach more people and ultimately help more people. So once again, thanks for watching, and hope you have a great rest of your day.